We want you to get in touch with us. We want your opinions on the day's big stories. You can get in touch via the usual ways at GBNews on social media or gbviews at gbnews.uk. Let's start the day by taking a look at some of today's newspaper front pages, starting with the Mail on Sunday, which leads with the news that school pupils will be forced to wear masks all day in order to keep classrooms open this month. The Education Secretary, Nhs Staffing last night said he and Boris Johnson saw schools as their number one priority amid skyrocketing COVID cases.
The story also leads the Sunday Telegraph, defending the decision to reimpose masks in classrooms. Nhs Staffing said it was designed to help maximise the number of children in school and would remain only as long as needed. Also on the front page, the PM is being urged to cut tax on fuel bills to ease the cost of living crisis.
The Independent also leads with that story and reports that the surge in cases is likely to lead to even more stricter rules inside schools and colleges.
The Observer also leads with the same story and reports that Labour leader Keir Starmer has urged more tests to be made available for parents. We'll get the National Pharmacy Association's thoughts on COVID testing crisis later this hour.
Yeah, the Sunday Times, let's have a look at that. There you go, leads with the Nhs Staffing Crisis as it reports nearly 1 in 10 were absent on New Year's Eve. Boris Johnson has told ministers to test emergency contingency plans to minimise the disruption to services such as hospitals, schools and social care.
The Daily Express leads with a warning for the PM that the next few days are crucial in the fight against Omicron. NHS chiefs have warned that the health service is beyond full stretch as COVID numbers hit new records.
Sunday Mirror splashes their exclusive interview with the ex-lover of Virginia Giuffre, who claims Prince Andrew did abuse her. Anthony Figueroa alleges that former sex slave Giuffre, then 17, confided in him about what happened with the Duke, who strongly denies the allegations.
The Sunday People reports that major military figures are pushing for Prince Andrew to leave the armed forces. That's despite the Prince denying all allegations against him.
And the Daily Star leads with a bizarre poll that has found 12% of people aged 24 to 35 believe the world is being ruled by lizards in human form. Joining us to discuss possibly that breaking story is journalist and author James Bloodworth and academic Dr. Lisa Mackenzie. A very good morning to both of you. How are you?
Good morning. A little bit tired, but well.
Yeah.
Morning. The GBNews coffee's keeping me going.
Oh, good. We like to hear it. We like to hear it. Let's start with that big story all over the papers this morning. School pupils told to wear masks all day. James, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's if you're a pupil in school, I think that's regrettable. I think it's I don't mind wearing a mask on the tube or whatever to protect others, and I feel like I've got less sick in terms of catching colds and things since I've been wearing a mask. But I think it's not pleasant, and I think would be very unpleasant for a child to sit in a classroom all day with a mask on. I also think it's probably the horse has already bolted as far as Omicron goes. I think this variant is so transmissible that I'm not sure that masks will have a huge impact. But at the same time, I mean, all of that said, measures like this, I'm glad the government is sticking with measures like this instead of imposing a lockdown, because I think at this point, I think it's too late for a lockdown. And I think we need to kind of 2 years into the pandemic, when most people have been vaccinated, we need to get back to normal. And if the NHS is overrun with patients, then we need to increase the capacity of the NHS and employ more staff in the NHS. We can't shut down society every year, every winter, because the NHS is in crisis.
Yeah. Lisa, don't we need these kind of measures in order to protect the most vulnerable in society and those who choose not to have the vaccine?
Do you know what? I'm really torn on this, and I have been from the day one, really, with the masks, because I know the science is there that the mask can help, but like James, I do think the horse has bolted a little bit with Omicron. There's thousands testing. I worry, there's two things that I really worry about with the masks, and particularly with children, is the long-term sort of psychological effects. And I know for very small children, you know, I've read newspaper stories about sort of 4 and 5-year-olds being afraid of people who haven't got masks on. And so that kind of worries me that we've got this normal where people who don't wear a mask seems to be unkind or dangerous. So I think that worries me for small children. But I suppose if wearing a mask helps prevent full lockdowns and keeps children in school, you know, for poorer children and children that live in poorer communities, the lockdowns and homeschooling has been devastating, absolutely devastating. So for me, the priority is keeping them at school.
James, I think a lot of people will agree with you that, you know, you prefer these sorts of measures, this mandatory wearing a mask in schools rather than a full lockdown. But I do wonder how much these measures actually do help. I mean, anybody that's walked past a school, let alone has kids, knows that the second that kids leave the classroom, they're whipping off these masks. When they're in the canteen together, it would be the same story as it would be in the playground as well. I mean, how much of wearing a mask in the corridor and in the classrooms, how much do you think that will even make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it will make that much of a difference. I think this is one of those things where Omicron is going to spread through the population. There are estimates that globally, 8 in 10 people will have had COVID by the end of 2022. And I think these things like the mask mandate in schools, it's trying to feel like we have some kind of control over the situation when I'm not sure we really do. I mean, we may have had more control. I mean, I supported the initial lockdown, I think, at the time. Something had to be done while a vaccine was developed. But I think at this point, the variant Omicron spreads so easily that this is not even tinkering at the edges. It's people want to feel like something is being done.
Yeah.
But this is an aspect of nature that kind of we don't have complete control over.
Yeah. What else, just very quickly, guys, what else have you spotted in the papers this morning that's caught your eye?
So there was a story about Boris losing ground in the red wall seats, which I find quite interesting, because going back to 2019, the general election, the Labour Party, you know, lost lots of support in some of its historic kind of strongholds, particularly in the north of England, and lost support in places like South Wales, in the valleys, former industrial towns, and people felt that, with Jeremy Corbyn in particular, the kind of Labour Party it represented kind of a metropolitan elite. It represented these kind of bizarre fringe obsessions. But Labour's kind of been gaining ground in those areas. And it's partly because of Boris Johnson, the view that he was someone who did manage to pick up support in those seats, but he's now viewed in many places as a hypocrite for the Downing Street parties during the COVID lockdowns. So the red wall areas, many of those places, well, generally in the country, there was support for protections for lockdowns, for measures to protect the country from COVID last year. People did make huge sacrifices, and then to see members of the government like egregiously flouting the rules, I think has really damaged Tory support in those seats. I also think the cost of living issues as well. So I think there's an element of the Conservative Party, of the kind of right, which thinks that you just win working class seats by fighting this kind of culture war, because many of these red wall seats, they tend to be more socially conservative voters, and the kind of the way the left and the Labour Party and progressives sometimes kind of get obsessed over these very fringe extreme issues, that puts a lot of those voters off who'd naturally be inclined to vote for a left-wing party. But I think the cost of living crisis, the government is presiding over a massive cost of living crisis, and I think that's allowing the Labour Party to pick up support, because it doesn't feel like the government is doing a great deal about that.
I mean, I'm from one of those red wall areas. I was born in Sutton in Ashfield, and which is right next to Mansfield, and Mansfield was one of those bellwether seats that went first, actually. It went before 2019. It flipped very early. And I'm not sure about this sort of picking up support of Labour. There is definitely in those communities I've also been doing research in those communities since 2015 as well. There is definitely an expectation that the people there never thought that the Tories, they voted for the Tories really as against the Labour Party. The Labour Party had been in these places forever and nothing changed. You know, they were mostly flown in MPs who were friends of friends.
It was a protest vote.
Yeah. And so what happened is this protest vote happened. Are those voters turning off the Tories? Yes. But are they leaning more to Labour? No. And I think this is what's happening at the moment, this sort of anti-politics politics. Because if you go to those places, you're more likely now to hear, you know, they're all the same. None of them are going to do anything for us. You know, the Labour Party are more interested in their own careers. The Tories are not interested in us at all. So I would say that what we need to be looking for is this sort of anti-politics politics that's right at the fringes now of working class communities. And I'd say that's not just here in the UK, it's in the US and in Europe as well. The major parties, the elites, right from the royalty onwards, have been gaining power and sort of denying the existence of working class people in this country for so long that, you know, there is no faith in the system at all.
Yeah, which of course leads to voter apathy. It's not good for democracy. So it's really interesting. We're going to have to leave it there, guys, for now. But thank you very much, James Bloodworth and Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, our panel of paper reviewers this morning, who will be joining us throughout the morning here on the Great British Breakfast.
Yeah, do get in touch on what we were just talking about there, with Marston schools and also lateral flow testing as well. Should we be prioritising NHS workers? Do get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And we were just speaking there about Boris losing ground in red wall constituencies. I think that leads in really well to our next guest. So the Downing Street Christmas party scandal capped a year of notable scandals in the Conservative Party. Boris Johnson came under fire at the end of the last year as the party's popularity plummeted in the polls and they lost their seat in the North Shropshire by-election.
Yeah, the beleaguered PM also saw the biggest rebellion of his premiership as 100 of his MPs voted against COVID restrictions last month. So how did the Tory party heal those divisions this year? We're delighted to be joined by Joseph Robertson from the Orthodox Conservatives think tank. Joseph, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us at 6:13 on a Sunday morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
What does Boris Johnson have to do this year to unite the Conservative Party and regain that lead in the polls?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing, there was a very good point alluded to by Dr. Lisa just then, which is that people aren't just looking at Labour as an alternative. They are looking at other parties. I was up in North Shropshire. I'm on the electoral roll up there. And it was quite interesting to see the mood during the recent by-election. I think a lot of people are concerned that the Tories have fallen out of touch with local issues. In a seat like North Shropshire, where there was a heavy pro-Brexit majority, people are afraid that they haven't really had their promises delivered on. And when it comes to the levelling up agenda, which has been the main focus for the Tory party, I think, external to the recent pandemic, they missed out on 3 rounds of funding there. So I think what's happening is the traditional Tory voter base are being alienated because the Tory party simply isn't taking the time to look at local issues anymore. And they're falling out of touch with the mood of the people. And I think that's going to be greatly reflected, especially in the red wall seats and further north we go, that people feel like their needs are just not being taken care of. So I think, first of all, the Conservative Party has to do some soul searching and try to reconnect with this local voter base and with its traditional voter base and look at what issues they are actually affected by day to day.
Good morning to you and a happy new year. I do want to pick you up on that point, and you touched upon it there, but how much of the Conservative Party still Conservative? I mean, Boris Johnson broke an election promise by hiking national insurance after promising not to do so. And lots of people would say that he's committed to green policies at the cost of the taxpayer. I mean, how much are these policies going to be losing traditional Conservative voters?
Well, hugely, and I mean, the debate really has to be around the word conservative. What are we conserving at this point if we're a conservative party? And I think one of the things that traditional Tory voters will have always been fooled by is the idea that tax and an increase in social cost of living can actually be something that is conservative. It's just not the conservative way. It never has been. And I think people have been falling for the same trick time and time again. I mean, under Cameron, there was quite what people would call a liberal premiership socially. And then we moved into May, which was a weaker premiership and certainly not something that we've seen as a traditional conservative government. And now we're with Johnson, who appears to be looking at more supranational issues. So when we come to the green agenda, I saw a quote recently circulating that global warming was, London was the birthplace of global warming. Now we can talk about the science on that all day long, but I think the reality is people see it as a metropolitan movement, and this idea that people are going to have to pay like 100% more in things like new boilers, and they're going to have to start phasing out their petrol and diesel cars is just not something that's going to resonate with people who are already seeing some of the highest taxation rates since World War II. We're just not looking at a fiscally conservative government right now at all.
Yeah. So how much of this, isn't there also a degree, part of it appears to be about issues that you were talking about, like local issues, etc., and stuff that people care about, the cost of living, things like that, and you've just alluded to energy prices there. How much of it is about actual trust in the Prime Minister himself?
Well, I don't think there is any trust in the Prime Minister, and I think that's not just coming from the voter base, that's coming from within the Cabinet. We're seeing huge conflicts. We've just had Lord Frost's resignation. I'm sure there's more to come. And I think one of the major issues is that the Prime Minister is simply not a leading voice. He's very much a voice in a melee that doesn't quite know what it's doing. He's not taking charge on issues like immigration. All he seems to want to talk about at the moment is booster shots, which the science suggests simply don't work for Omicron. And we're looking at a kind of a backtracking using the pandemic crisis as a means to...
Joseph, when you say the science, yes, suggests that booster shots don't work for Omicron, what do you mean? Because the UK Health Security Agency is quite clear that it does help.
There was a recent Danish cohort study just come out through medRxiv, which shows that within 3 months, the vaccine effectiveness of Pfizer and Moderna against Omicron is actually negative, which would suggest, and this is early stage findings, but this would suggest that we're actually looking at people's immunity being essentially not boosted towards Omicron and only perhaps towards Delta, as the early kind of results showed. But that is an issue that needs to be looked at. I think that emerging science is just not talked about at government level at the moment. And there is a reason for that, which, like I said, is that the Prime Minister is trying to avoid other issues and is trying to look at the scientific crisis as a way to cover up big cracks in the infrastructure.
Joseph, we've only got about 30 seconds left with you, but I just wanted to ask, is Boris Johnson fit to lead? And if not, who should he be replaced by, in your view?
Well, I think, it's a difficult question. I don't think he is fit to lead. I think he's shown that. He's not clamping down on the issues that are key to voters. He's not looking at immigration. He's not addressing how the green agenda will affect the pocket of the taxpayer. And he's certainly not looking at local issues. I mean, when he came up to North Shropshire for a brief, however long, half-an-hour visit, he did pretty much nothing except talk about vaccines, get the name of the candidate wrong, and then disappear again. So I think he needs to get his act together if he wants to stay in power for much longer. I think Sir Graham Brady is going to have a job on his hands soon to address that with the 1922 Commission. And I think the next leadership has to come from outside the cabinet, if I'm perfectly honest. In a real Conservative government, most of the people still there or still with a realistic opportunity of taking the leadership simply wouldn't cut it. So we have to look to the backbenchers, in my opinion.
Joseph, thank you so much for your time this morning. Joseph Robertson there from the think tank Orthodox Conservatives. OK, here's what else is going on today. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has apparently tasked ministers with drawing up robust contingency plans as sky-high COVID cases hit the public sector and businesses. Public sector bosses have been told to prepare for a worst-case scenario of up to a quarter of staff being off work.
there are reports that work-from-home guidance in England could be set to roll on for most of January.
20 Tory MPs and peers have written to the Prime Minister urging him to scrap taxes on rapidly rising energy bills. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, they've urged Boris Johnson and the Chancellor to help consumers face fuel poverty as gas and electricity payments continue to rocket.
Pressure continues to mount on the Prime Minister as a bombshell poll puts the Conservatives 16 points behind Labour. A Mail on Sunday poll of the 57 constituencies gained in the 2019 general election puts Labour on 49% and the Conservatives on just 33%.
And the search for survivors continues in Colorado after wildfires destroyed nearly 1,000 homes and prompted a widespread evacuation. 3 people are missing and feared dead after a wind-stoked wildfire roared through 2 towns in Boulder County.
Coming up, we will hear from the National Pharmacy Association's Oliver Pickard on what the COVID testing crisis has had on the shortage of PCR and lateral flows. But first, here's the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking to get off to a mild but breezy and in places very showery start. The southwest of England will begin Sunday dry with some bright spells, although there will be a bit of a southwesterly breeze, which will take the edge off the mild feel. The southeast will be cloudier with quite a gusty wind blowing, and 1 or 2 showers are also on the cards here. Overnight rain will have just cleared to the east of Wales come the morning, and so it's looking mainly dry with the sun appearing in places. A different story, though, as we head to northwest England, as showery rain will still be clearing from these parts, with drier conditions beginning to tuck in from the west. A pretty wet start is likely in Newcastle and the rest of the northeast of England. A few heavy bursts of rain are possible, although here the wind will be a little lighter than elsewhere. Whilst blustery showers are likely towards the north and west, most southern and eastern parts of Scotland should get off to a fine start, with fairly mild temperatures and some sunshine. For Northern Ireland, a mixed bag of weather is expected. There'll be some bright weather, but with a few blustery showers also sweeping in from the west. Through the remainder of the morning, most eastern areas will become dry and bright, whilst further showers feed in across the west.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. Good to have you with us, Ellie and Paul here this morning. Lots of you getting in touch with us as well. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Good morning to you, Shane, who says, I think that the government should pull their finger out and get the lateral flow test back in stock. We shouldn't have to prioritise people if we have enough for all. It's unacceptable that they've been out of stock for a week until Saturday for a few hours now and then back out of stock this morning. It's appalling for those who need to test on day 6 and 7 of isolation for work, like I have to, on Monday and Tuesday. Let us know what you think about that. We're talking about the testing this morning because the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, urging parents to test their children at least twice a week to ensure they're not spreading COVID.
But with schools returning this week and testing kits still at a premium, the pressure is on the government to provide enough tests to meet the increased demand.
Yeah, and with the NHS also struggling to take the strain, is it time to prioritise NHS workers for tests? Olivier Picard is from the National Pharmacy Association and joins us now. Very good morning to you, Olivier. What do you make about prioritising NHS workers for testing?
Yeah, and I think that's right. I mean, clearly people are being asked to test and they're trying to do the right thing by testing, especially before they meet friends and family. And being difficult to access some of the test kits makes it impossible. But a story that I wanted to say is I was in the pharmacy on Friday and one of the GP came to try and collect some lateral flow tests. And the reason they wanted to test is because they were supposed to work over the weekend. And unfortunately, we didn't have any tests to give. And it's not right that pharmacists, GPs or nurses cannot access the test in any different way than other customers.
Why do you think that is? Where is it going wrong? Is it simply, is it government policy? Is it the fact there simply aren't enough tests to go around?
I think there's an increase in demand, and obviously there are also an element of people testing more at this time of year. So both those factors together means that these tests are a bit more difficult. I think planning by the government is sort of in place. There are tests that are available. But, typically we're hearing there is 4,000 or 5,000 boxes of tests coming each day into the country and into distribution. But there's almost 12,000 community pharmacies. So even if that seems like a large number of boxes, it's still not one per pharmacy. And therefore, there will be areas of the country that may lack the supply for a number of days. And that's what we've seen just before Christmas and New Year.
Olivier, good morning to you. Do you think that we need to change the way that we use lateral flows? I mean, you touched upon it there. People are testing every single day at the moment to make sure that they're safe to go to an event or to see their family over the festive period. It's almost no surprise that we have such a shortage if every person is wanting one every single day, not to even mention the waste of single-use plastic that we're going through at the moment. Do you think that lateral flows should just be used for people who have been exposed or have symptoms?
Look, people are testing because they are being asked to test by the government. People are trying to do what the government wants them to do, which is be safe and test before. The issue that you have here is not so much whether the testing program is working the way it should, is whether the government is able to deliver on the amount of tests that is required for people to do what they are being asked to do. Now,
the messaging needs to change then. So do you think that messaging needs to change then? Because as we can see, that we're not getting enough tests out. Sajid Javid has said this could last another 2 weeks. So whilst we have this shortage, does that messaging that we need to be testing every day in order to go to events, even if we're asymptomatic or we don't have any symptoms, should that continue to be the message?
A lot of people are discovering that they are testing positive to COVID because they're testing at home, before going to meet friends and families. And therefore, changing the program may lead to spreading the disease further. What is not right, clearly, is that the people that need to test, such as healthcare workers or people, even children going back to school this week, it's quite clearly very important that we test because so many people are testing positive without any symptoms at the moment. And that's thanks to the vaccination program, amongst other things. However, changing it dramatically could lead to spreading the disease further. And therefore, at the moment, we really want the government to try and prioritize the test into the areas where people are clearly needing to test. And that is probably schools, healthcare workers, and perhaps, people in general need to take ownership of the situation. And we've seen some people being frustrated at community pharmacy teams because they are unable to access the test. And I think that's not right because pharmacy teams and other healthcare workers are working flat out to try and deliver the best service possible in these difficult times. And it is important that people understand that whilst we may have a shortage of supply, perhaps they need to adapt their own behaviour. However, just remember what I said earlier. The government is asking people to test before they meet. And therefore, what the government needs to do is to deliver on those tests or change the rules. But people are trying to comply with the rules that are imposed by the government or asked to follow by the government.
Yeah, really appreciate your time this morning, Olivier. It's a difficult situation. Olivier Picard there from the National Pharmacy Association. Do let us know about your experiences of trying to get a test, a lateral flow test from the pharmacy. I know I've been trying to get one from a pharmacy for weeks now and haven't been able to. I've had to keep refreshing it on the government website and then have it delivered in the post. So, yeah, difficult to get that. And as far as I know, it's very, very difficult to get a PCR test at the moment as well. So do let us know about your experiences. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Now, to many of his thousands of Instagram followers, Harrison Ward is an outdoor cook and fell runner. What some people might not know, though, is he's had a battle with depression and alcohol addiction. Our North West of England reporter Bradley Harris went to meet him.
Mountains, usually steep, cold, and take determination to reach the top. But for Harrison Ward, the countryside is his escape, and also his kitchen. The journey to the summit, though, hasn't been easy. Harrison used to be 22 stone, battling alcoholism and depression.
Really, I've been a sufferer of depression since puberty, really. I didn't know what it was at the time when it first sort of hit me. I was just sort of overwhelmed with this sense of self-loathing, insecurity, and just all these sort of dark thoughts in my head, really. It was something that I kept very quiet. I didn't really share with friends or family. But really, it began to escalate as I got older. At 18, I really discovered alcohol as a source of almost sedating my mind in a way. It's sort of like self-medicating to sort of shut off those thoughts and just completely just turn myself into oblivion. So originally, depression sort of brought alcohol in as a medicine, but it quickly became my poison. And as the years sort of went by, from 18 to 19, by this point, I was regularly drinking sort of 10, 15 pints a day. And at my height, probably over 20 pints a day at this point. So I'd always worked a lot in the hospitality trade too, where I'd worked sort of behind the bar, both in restaurants, kitchens, hotels. And it was quite accessible, I guess. A big kid in a sweet shop having quite a lot of access to that sort of lifestyle. It got to a point for me where I just couldn't see an escape anymore. Alcohol was no longer providing that. And just sort of my own head really was just constantly bringing me down to a point where I didn't want to live.
Since then, it's the outdoors that have led Harrison onto a new path. The challenge of walking up hills, he says, felt like the challenges he was facing in his own life.
Reaching the top of that summit, being that top, that feeling of redemption, that feeling of success, and looking down below on sort of the tar and the edges and sort of the beauty from the top of that mountain, it was something that really sung to me and felt like a new sort of addiction was being ignited. And that really spanned this sort of journey. So from then, I climbed a lot of fells in the Lake District. I went and did Snowdon in Wales, Ben Nevis in Scotland, and then began to actually start running in these hills as well. Whilst this complete turnaround, all in within the first sort of maybe 6 to 9 months from being on the end of a bar every night, just completely inebriated, I would have laughed you at the pub if you just said that's what I've been doing.
His love for the outdoors didn't stop there either. With a passion of food, Harrison started cooking outside.
I cannot believe this is actually happening. We are cooking outside. Normally I just pack a ham sandwich or something, Harrison, but you've got literally everything here. The stove, you've got the ingredients. What are we cooking?
So we're going to have some nice garlic mushrooms with some sort of toasted sourdough. And we're just going to sort of a bit of a parsley garnish in the end here in this beautiful sort of viewed outdoors of Rydal Water.
Wow, I feel like I'm in a 5-star restaurant, apart from I'm soaking wet. We're not inside, but do you know what? I love it, and the heat from the stove is keeping us warm. So, do you know what? I'll let you kick things off.
Let's get started then.
I just want to ask you, cooking outdoors, did you start off with all the equipment, or did you start off with some ham sandwiches and thought, I can do better than this?
I said mainly it was initially sort of packed lunches, if you will. So it was making dishes at home that I then brought into the outdoors, maybe leftovers or bits that I made purpose-built for the hike. Some risottos, so stews in there we had. And then initially started getting the sort of repertoire and the kit together of what I needed to recreate that sort of kitchen in the outdoors in an environment like this. So of course there is purpose-built stuff that's made for the job, a bit more lightweight. And again, decanting things down to smaller containers and whatnot to take it out there. To achieve these meals in the great outdoors.
Becoming a hiker and an outdoor cook wasn't always the plan, but Harrison now feels in a much better place. Speaking out, he says, made all the difference.
Just reaching out and talking, I think, is something that's hugely important when you're going through these things. I mean, I'd held this secret for many a year and tried to battle it through my own way and found my own mechanisms, if you will, that, as I mentioned, became a further poison. But reaching out and talking was something that really helped me sort of turn this around and make positive steps for a positive life.
Bradley Harris, GB News.
There you go, healthier eating and more exercise. Speaking of which, are you wanting to get fit for 2022? We're going to be speaking to a fitness expert in just a moment after this.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching The Great British Breakfast. It's just gone 6:39, and it's that time of the year where we all feel a little bit full after Christmas, and for many, the new year is going to be about getting fit.
Yeah, for some that will involve spending fortunes on expensive fitness machines or reactivating that gym membership, but there are other less expensive ways to lose some weight and get active. Joining us now is Vibe Concepts international fitness presenter Delvin Clark. Delvin, I'm very interested. Good morning to you. Are you joining us from a nightclub, actually? I'm just wondering.
Well, actually, it's from my kitchen. I thought I'd make the effort and put a nice setup for you guys.
Oh, that is an amazing kitchen setup. Listen, I'm really interested in how to get fit but not spend loads of money. Is this just about running up and down your stairs 5 times a day?
Something a bit more complex than that, but more enjoyable as well, okay? Because running up and down stairs can be hard work. And I think it's always nicer and easier to dance, really, or just to move your body and enjoy the music and have a great time. That's what I think.
Come on then, Delvin, what should people be doing in their new year then? What are your top tips?
Well, my first tip is definitely get out of the house, enjoy people's company, walk around the park or go to a fitness centre and do some easy, gentle exercise to start off. Then as time goes by, do some more, do different kinds of exercises, because remember, physical activity isn't just good for the body, it's also good for the mind. Okay, so get out, meet some people, get a bit sweaty sometimes, do a different arrangement of classes, okay, and have a great time.
I'm interested in your phrase, as time goes by, and then you work the exercise up. Should you monitor it? Should you measure it? Should you use some of those apps or watches that you can get that kind of monitor your heart rate, that kind of thing?
For me personally, I would probably stay away from using apps and different gadgets, because you get more, predisposed of looking at your efforts rather than feeling your efforts. My concept is Vibe Concepts, and we go with the vibration and the feeling and the feel-good factor of fitness, more so than monitoring our fitness with a watch or with a heart rate monitor. Those things, really, you become a slave to those things, I think. So if you just move yourself physically over a certain amount of time, and hopefully you'll enjoy it, and when you enjoy it, the more you'll do it, and you get fitter and stronger doing that.
So, Delvin, for people who have never exercised before, the whole thing can feel quite daunting, and there's so many different ways to exercise now. You've got all these fancy clubs and gym classes. Where is the best place to start if you've never exercised before but you'd like to get fitter in 2022?
I always feel when it comes to exercise, people have a misconception. They think you have to have a rigorous fitness exercise routine. You don't have to have that. If you're just starting off, get out to the park, go for a walk. If you have a pet dog, walk with the dog, a bit more, energetically, if you like, with the dog, and then pace yourself. Well, in time, I would say join a fitness centre and do some freestyle fitness classes, because that, I feel, with the music and the atmosphere and other people around you, it gives you a better feeling, and I think you get more out of exercise when you're in that environment.
Do you know what? I'm interested in the feel-good feeling of doing exercise, because I exercised for the first time the other day in months and I did not feel good after it. In fact, I was kind of having a small heart attack next to the road.
That's really interesting, because it depends on who you go to and what you're actually doing. If you go to an instructor whereby the instructor's having a great time himself or herself, usually the participants are having a great time as well. When you do a certain kind of fitness, which is like HIIT, or heart rate related, sometimes it can be more pain than fun. And that's not really a good way to do exercise. Me personally speaking, I feel if you just go along to a gym or a fitness centre, move around with the instructor and with other people, that's the perfect environment to get fit and strong. And as I said, it's very good for the mental health as well, because you'll find that people now, especially this time, they need to be mixing a little bit more with people and dancing with people and having good music and feeling good inside. That's what I think anyway.
Yeah, what's your opinion on running, on just going running? Because you're talking about classes, you're talking about high-intensity workouts. What about people who just go for a run?
Okay, now, running is fine. I used to run myself every morning for a long time, and I loved it. If you get some good music, put earphones in and go for a run, that's great. I wouldn't recommend it if you're underweight or overweight. I'd rather you just start off walking first, maybe power walking first. Then over time, advance to jogging, because sometimes jogging can be hard work on the knees and on the hips as well. So start walking first, then over time, maybe jog for a certain part of the route, and then maybe jog the whole route, something like that. Okay, but start off nice and easy first, to get going first. Nice and easy, that's the first thing I think.
Devon, we had a guest on yesterday who said, pretty shocking actually, only 6% of people actually stick to their New Year's resolutions. And I'm sure lots of people watching at home now will have made a resolution that they want to get fit in 2022. Do you think there is too much pressure on people just to start to get fit on the 1st and 2nd of January? And how best do you think people should stick to it?
Okay. Every time this time of the year comes around, okay, end of Christmas, New Year, people automatically want to get fit because of all the food and drink they've had. The mistake they make, they go into it too hard and they put too much intensity and too much emphasis on trying to get fit. Put the emphasis on enjoying what you're doing in a fitness environment. When you have that, you'll have more longevity. Because when you do something you love, you get much more out of it than doing something you hate. So my advice is really and truly, if you've got a resolution of any sorts, the way to stick to it is find something you enjoy doing and then do that over a period of time and then maybe change a few things, and over time you get fitter and you'll stick with the routine that you have and do things you enjoy and that you love, more so than hurting yourself.
Yeah, listen, Delvin, we're going to have to leave it there. But what I'm interested to know as well, just as we leave you, is are you going to leave the lights on after you finish talking to us? Because I'm imagining you sitting there eating your cornflakes with those lights on.
Permanent disco.
Well, I was going to give you a bit of a movement, actually. Do you want to see something? Yes or no?
Yeah, go on
then.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give you a bit of an easy aerobic kind of dance routine. See how you get on. Okay, I'll play some music. Okay? One moment.
Right. Wow. Here we go. Look.
How cool is that, huh? How cool is that?
6:46 in the morning. I'm very impressed.
Here he goes, folks.
That's how I roll. One moment.
Here he goes. I assume there's no one trying to sleep upstairs.
Let's hope not.
Nah, I'm here all along. Okay, can you hear that?
Yeah, we've got it.
Yes. Excellent. Okay.
Here we go.
All right.
He's going to get a shout down the stairs in a minute. Turn that down, Delvin.
March here.
Let's start with the march.
We're going to breathe in. Hope you can see me. I'm going to breathe in. Join you. And out. One more time. Okay, we're going to start with easy walk. Okay. 2 more.
Yeah.
1 more. 4 knee repeater here. 1, 2, and march. Yes? Okay, easy walk this way. Here we go. And again. 2 more. 1 more. 4 knee repeater. 4, 3, 2, and 1.
There you go. Delvin, we'll have to leave it there, Delvin. But we got a little flavour there. But thank you, Delvin. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
We can't interrupt his dance routine now. Look at this.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Delvin Clark there, giving you a free fitness class on the Great British Breakfast.
We need to get him in the studio
There you go.
now.
He's still going, actually.
What
He's still
a way to
going. We'll have
start
to leave
the
him
year.
there. Right. Do let us know what you think about that. And your tips for getting fit as well. Even little fitness tips that you do at home. Maybe it's going up and walking up and down the stairs, or instead of taking the lift, or something like that. Just do let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. It is 6:48.
OK, here's what else is going on today. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has apparently tasked ministers with drawing up robust contingency plans as sky-high COVID cases hit the public sector and businesses. Public sector bosses have been told to prepare for a worst-case scenario of up to a quarter of staff off work. There are reports that work-from-home guidance in England could be set to roll on for most of January.
Swear this morning, 20 Tory MPs and peers have written to the Prime Minister urging him to scrap taxes on rapidly rising energy bills. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, they've urged Boris Johnson and the Chancellor Rishi Sunak to help consumers facing fuel poverty as gas and electricity payments continue to rocket.
Pressure continues to mount on the Prime Minister as a bombshell poll puts the Conservatives 16 points behind Labour. A Mail on Sunday poll of the 57 constituencies gained in the 2019 general election puts Labour on 49% and the Conservatives on just 33%.
And the search for survivors continues in Colorado after wildfires destroyed nearly 1,000 homes and prompted a widespread evacuation. 3 people are missing and feared dead after a wind-stoked wildfire roared through 2 towns in Boulder County.
OK, it's just coming up to 6:50 in the morning, so it's time to look at today's front pages. Joining us again is journalist and author James Budworth and academic Dr. Lisa McKenzie. Good morning to both of you. You're with us all morning. We're very, very happy to have you. Today's top story is about students wearing masks in schools. What do we think about this? Lisa, let's start with you.
I think, I'm not a COVID denier. I know it's here, and I know that I think we're all going to get it at some point. We're 2 years down the line now, and I think we've got to live with it. And I think the constant sort of frightening, particularly of children, over mask wearing and what does it mean if you're not wearing a mask and you are, almost like the culture wars have extended into mask wearing now. I have heard some sort of, all over Twitter, there's lots of stories about children getting on buses and trains and sort of being frightened of people who are not wearing masks and sort of, mummy, that man hasn't got a mask on, he's dangerous. Signs outside schools saying, be kind to each other, wear your mask. And obviously the opposite of being kind is not being kind. So I am worried about what this is doing to small children and how they are going to see the world. If you're 5 years old, your whole memories of your whole life is the pandemic and being scared of each other. Small children, when they meet a friend, they hug and they kiss and they hold hands, and that social contact has been stopped. So that kind of worries me, really. What are we leaving on these very small children for them to grow up and socially integrate with the rest of the world?
Yeah, James, it's about a balance, isn't it, between cautious and careful and making children aware of what they have to do to stay healthy, but also not being paranoid and anxious.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think some of these measures, like things like mask wearing for adults on the tube, I think those things, I comply with those things. I think people should, because I think it's far preferable to lockdowns or anything like all the restrictions we experienced in 2020 and early last year. I think with schools it's slightly different, because I think with children, I can't imagine when I was young, I had asthma. It would be particularly nice to be sat in a classroom with a face mask on all day. I don't find it particularly pleasant now. And I also think that the horse has bolted in terms of Omicron and the spread of this variant. I think we feel there's not much we can do about this. It spreads so easily. There's not much we can do about it in terms of stopping that spread. And I think people are demanding that the government does something. And I think this is one of those things where you're kind of tinkering around the edges. It's, by bringing masks in for school kids, I don't think you're going to do much to. I think the virus, if someone has it in a classroom, is so transmissible, Omicron, that it will spread around the classroom. So, yeah, it's tinkering around the edges. I think the things like the vaccine, the booster program, I think that's where you protect people, really. At the moment, these other measures, I think it's just people feel like something must be done.
I have to say, James, that's a really good point you made about face masks, which is, you said you had asthma growing up and then it would have been, difficult to wear a face mask all the time. This week, I've been wearing a face mask a lot after I was sitting next to someone with COVID and then I couldn't get a PCR test, so I was taking precautions, sitting at home wearing a face mask. And I have to say, I don't know how you found this yourself, Lisa. It actually felt quite claustrophobic after wearing it a long time. It must be difficult for kids when they're sitting there for 6 hours a day in the classroom wearing these face masks.
Yeah, I've got asthma as well. As a child, I grew up in a very damp house, so I developed asthma. And I've noticed that when I wear my face mask for an extended amount of time, I have to use my inhalers more. And surely, my doctor's actually commented that I'm getting through my inhalers much faster than the month I'm allowed. And that is because after sort of 10 minutes of wearing a mask, I'm having to inhale steroids. So I'm sure that's not good for me either. I think that, the mask wearing, it's almost like low-hanging fruit, isn't it? Wear a mask. It looks like it does something, so it does something. But obviously, do we wear them correctly? Are the masks that we're wearing clean? I know mine aren't. Mine's in my pocket and I just pull it out. I see people all over with masks pulled down below their nose. I'm not sure, really, what the mask is doing, apart from sort of saying to the other people on the train or on the bus, I've got a mask on.
Yeah. It's maybe masking bad breath.
Yeah.
We've been asking people at home to get in touch on this story. Lots of you have been doing so. It's GBViews at gbnews.uk. Ryan has just been in touch. He says, regarding wearing masks in schools, it will not prevent the transmission of the Omicron variant. And he would like to know, has this been tested in typical new build school classrooms where masks will be worn? And in response to that, the government has actually implemented air filtration units in 7,000 schools so far. There have been calls this morning for all schools to be fitted with them. So thank you so much for your views on that. And we will come back to our fantastic paper reviewers in the next hour. That's James Budworth and Dr. Lisa McKenzie. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Yeah, lots of you getting in touch with us on masks, also on how the government is trying to deal with workplace absences. We're going to be talking about the cost of living as well coming up. There's a group of Conservative MPs and peers who've written to the government asking for a cut in green energy levies on household bills in an effort to try and curb the soaring cost of gas prices, which is feeding into energy bills in homes around the country over winter.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking to get off to a mild but breezy and in places very showery start. The southwest of England will begin Sunday dry with some bright spells, although there will be a bit of a southwesterly breeze, which will take the edge off the mild feel. The southeast will be cloudier with quite a gusty wind blowing, and 1 or 2 showers are also on the cards here. Overnight rain will have just cleared to the east of Wales come the morning, and so it's looking mainly dry with the sun appearing in places. A different story, though, as we head to northwest England, as showery rain will still be clearing from these parts, with drier conditions beginning to tuck in from the west. A pretty wet start is likely in Newcastle and the rest of the northeast of England. A few heavy bursts of rain are possible, although here the wind will be a little lighter than elsewhere. Whilst blustery showers are likely towards the north and west, most southern and eastern parts of Scotland should get off to a fine start, with fairly mild temperatures and some sunshine. For Northern Ireland, a mixed bag of weather is expected. There'll be some bright weather, but with a few blustery showers also sweeping in from the west. Through the remainder of the morning, most eastern areas will become dry and bright, whilst further showers feed in across the west.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, it's just about to go 7 a.m. on Sunday, the 2nd of January. This is your Great British Breakfast with Paul Hawkins and me, Ellie Costello.
Yeah, very good morning to you. Coming up with the cost of living set to soar in 2022. What effect will this have on families? We'll discuss that shortly with a market analyst.
With GPs across the country set to prescribe judgment-free fitness classes for depressed or diabetic women, we'll speak to a doctor who thinks this policy is a step in the right direction.
As masks are being recommended for children returning to schools, we speak to a bacteriologist on the latest Omicron situation facing the country.
We will also speak to a fitness guru on how lifestyle changes can help you to have a great start to 2022.
And as always, this show is all about you. We want to hear what you have to say on the day's big stories. You can drop us a line at GB News on social media or gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your company and a Happy New Year to you. Let's take a look at what's going on today. As you've been hearing this morning, secondary school students in England are again being asked to wear masks in classrooms to help tackle the rise in Omicron cases. Education Secretary Nhs Staffing says keeping schools open is the #1 priority as cases continue to hit record highs.
The Prime Minister Boris Johnson has apparently tasked ministers with drawing up robust contingency plans as sky-high COVID cases hit the public sector and businesses. Public sector bosses have been told to prepare for a worst-case scenario of up to a quarter of staff off work. There are reports work-from-home guidance in England could be set to roll on for most of January.
20 Tory MPs and peers have written to the Prime Minister urging him to scrap taxes on rapidly rising energy bills. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, they urged Boris Johnson and Chancellor Rishi Sunak to help consumers facing fuel poverty as gas and electricity payments continue to rocket.
Yeah, pressure continues to mount on the Prime Minister as a poll puts the Conservatives 16 points behind Labour. A Mail on Sunday poll of the 57 constituencies gained in the 2019 general election puts Labour on 49%, the Conservatives on just 33%.
And the search for survivors continues in Colorado after wildfires destroyed nearly 1,000 homes and prompted a widespread evacuation. 3 people are missing and feared dead after a wind-stoked wildfire roared through 2 towns in Boulder County.
So with the cost of living set to rise across the country, many families will be deeply concerned.
Now, a think tank has warned that households face an average hit of £1,200 to their incomes from the double whammy of rising energy bills and taxes.
The Resolution Foundation says families are facing a cost of living catastrophe when the energy price cap goes up and national insurance contributions set to rise by 1.25% in April.
At the same time, there's rising inflation forecast to peak in the spring at 6%, which means incomes are set to stagnate. It's all looking pretty miserable. So joining us now to discuss this is nuclear policy and power market policy analyst Malcolm Grimston. Good morning to you, Malcolm, and a Happy New Year to you. Not potentially a very happy New Year to people, families that could see energy bills of up to £2,000. Really difficult winter for many coming up. Why is this happening?
It's a dreadful combination of factors that are all hitting us at once. We had quite a severe winter last year. That meant global gas stocks were cut back. We had a reduction in production of gas. For example, the North Sea gas platforms didn't get properly maintained because of COVID for a year or two, understandably. So they're not producing or haven't been producing as much as they could. We had very low wind speeds throughout the summer. That meant even more gas being used for electricity. There are ongoing political concerns with the Russian gas reserves and how they're being supplied into Europe or not supplied into Europe. And so we found ourselves with all these factors coming together at the same time. And on top of that, increasing taxes to subsidise renewable energy. So when you put all those things together, now some of those will be short term. We're already seeing that gas production globally is increasing, is being ramped up to deal with this. That in due course will bring the gas price down rather. But when we also bear in mind that we had those dreadful power cuts in Scotland not so long ago, which implies we've got to spend more money on the wires that get the electricity from where it's made into our homes and businesses, then this is a problem which it will ease in due course, but I can't see it going away for quite a long time.
So what can the government do in the short term to try and mitigate that rise in prices, Malcolm? We've got the Net Zero Scrutiny Group of Conservatives today suggesting that the government could cut environmental levies on electricity and gas, also remove energy taxes. What do you make of that?
Yes, well, there's three things contribute to our power costs. There's the cost of the power stations and the fuel. Government can't do much about that. There's the cost of the wires, getting it into our homes. Government can't do much about that. So it is the green subsidies and VAT. VAT on domestic fuel is only 5%. It's a quarter of the rate on everything else. But I guess it is possible that that could be zero rated. That would bring power prices down by about 5%, which is a significant help. And then on top of that, the subsidies that are necessary to keep renewables going. The problem with wind, for example, is that when there is a lot of wind, and the last 2 or 3 days we've had superbly windy days and a lot of wind power being generated. But that means that in those days there can be a bit of a glut of electricity and prices can come down, so they don't make much money. And obviously when the wind isn't blowing, power prices shoot up because there's a shortage. But wind doesn't benefit because it's not generating. So money has to be made available to pay wind generators and actually to switch off when they're producing too much and to support them when they're not producing enough for an income. And of course, then there's the costs of the new wires that have to be put in. That's a subsidy towards renewables, all of which is there. So be clear, we're not talking about cutting taxes. We're talking about moving the taxes from the backs of the electricity consumer onto the backs of the general taxpayer. This is a zero-sum game. Somebody's got to pay these costs. I personally do believe that there are so many people suffering such problems with their power bill that cutting cutting direct taxes on energy in the short term is probably inevitable and the right thing to do. But let's not kid ourselves. That money is still going to come out of our pockets in one way or another.
Yeah, I guess if it's then redistributed through general taxation, some would argue that's a fairer way.
Yes, I think so, and I think there's a very strong argument for that. I mean, let's be clear, quite a lot of it is at the moment. Not everything lands on the backs of the electricity consumer. It is a partnership between us as power consumers and gas consumers and us as general taxpayers. But I do think at a time when particularly low-income families are going to be so caned with changes in universal credit and with the general return of inflation into our economy, particularly food inflation, which obviously has a disproportionately unfortunate effect on those of low income. But I do think there's a very strong argument for government intervening to protect those low-income households from perhaps the worst effects of this. But bearing that in mind, even if we reduced all these taxes to zero, our power prices at the moment would still be high because the fundamental change has been the global gas price in particular, which is something which is frankly out of the control of any individual government.
Yes, Malcolm, it is out of our control, but we do need to talk about the power of those outside forces, namely Russia, effectively turning on and off the taps, controlling the flow of gas to Europe. Do you think, if anything, this cost of living crisis and the cost of oil and gas has proven to us really that we need to rely less on Europe, less on Russia. We need to focus on generating our own energy, whether that be green energy or nuclear?
Yes, I mean, I think it's encouraging the government is speaking very positively about nuclear, and we are, of course, building a major new nuclear power station in Somerset. But even if we do get a proper move on with nuclear, that's not going to make a difference to our current situation. And indeed, our 1980s nuclear plants are coming to the end of their lives. We saw the first of those, first two of those closed off in the course of the last 2 or 3 months. and the others will follow before too long. So certainly, I think a lot can be done on that, but it won't produce benefits overnight. We do already generate a lot of electricity from renewables, but the problem there is that, well, as I mentioned, firstly, when there's an awful lot of wind, there can be difficulty producing too much power, and that can be very difficult if it ends up blowing people's electronic equipment or, heaven forbid, melting the grid wires. That's an extreme situation, but it has happened at times in the past when you get surges of power. And then, of course, what we do...
Malcolm, I just want to pick you up on that point. You're saying that when the wind blows too hard, there's effectively too much power in the grid and it can blow people's power sockets. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, that's right. I mean, what happens in practice is that we pay wind generators a lot of money to stop generating in what's called constraint payments. But in California, for example, where it's solar with California, they now have so much solar power on the system in the middle of the day that when you get the switchover, so when you get the sun setting and the solar power beginning to reduce, while at the same time general power demand increases into the evening because of the need for air conditioning, then we have seen a number of cases where local substations have actually caught fire as a result of this enormous strain that it's introducing. And there are suspicions that at least one of the Californian fires in recent years was prompted by a fire at a substation because of this issue. So renewables, the fact that at the moment we can't store meaningful amounts of power, which means we need to match supply and demand pretty much exactly in real time, means power sources that can change so very rapidly. Solar does every day, wind does very regularly, although not as predictably, where their output can change enormously. So you've either got to ratchet in or ratchet out other sources of electricity from different parts of the country to deal with it. These are enormous technical problems. I suspect they can largely be addressed, and they don't matter too much when wind is only generating 15-20% of your electricity, as we are in the UK at the moment. But as those figures increase, those challenges increase. And we have seen, for example, Germany, which claims to be a leader in renewables, has not installed did not install a single offshore wind turbine during 2021 because of the problems of what to do with the power when it's actually generated. So there are a lot of very exciting innovations around renewables, but that fundamental challenge that they don't produce the power when we need it necessarily, and that they vary so enormously in their output depending on weather conditions. There's a paradox that on the one hand, we're very worried about our weather and climate changing, but we're also moving to becoming more and more dependent on sources of energy that depend on the weather and the climate. And I think there's some issues there that we're going to have to look at very, very seriously as renewables increase. So renewables have this massive two advantages. They don't run out of fuel. They don't contribute to climate change. So I'm not knocking them as such, but they're not quite as simple as some of their advocates sometimes claim.
Malcolm, there are, of course, lessons to learn for the future, for certain. How much are you expecting the government to have to intervene in saving and bailing out energy companies? In the last 3 months of 2021, 20 energy suppliers went out of business and customers then had to shift to new providers. So how much are you expecting the government to step in? And of course, for those customers, they may be transferred to a more expensive tariff than their previous energy deal.
It's very difficult for government because the reason that the big companies are in a relatively stable state at this moment is that the big companies hedge their fuel. So some of the gas that we're getting from the big six power supply companies at the moment, they will in effect have bought a year ago at the prices that the market thought gas was going to be now a year ago, if you see what I mean. Now, clearly, a year ago, the market had no reason to think that gas prices would be very much different now from what they were at the beginning of last year, when they were not far short of a tenth of what they are today. The smaller companies, rather, I don't want to use the word fly by night, but they tended, generally speaking, to just go in, buy their gas pretty much when it was ready for delivery. Now, they got economic benefits from that, competitive benefit, because any sort of hedging costs you on balance, like any insurance policy does. But of course, when the crisis hits, those small companies not having taken out that insurance policy were hit. Now, if government intervenes to save those, in effect, government is taking on the responsibility that these companies have for taking their own long-term positions and almost rewarding failure. So I think if it were to get to the point that one of the big 6 suppliers started looking in trouble, then I think we'd have to look at this very, very differently. But I do see government's point that it doesn't want to encourage the power market to say, run on very short-term thinking, don't bother about the future, and if anything nasty happens, we will step in and rescue you. That wouldn't necessarily lead to better policy from electricity suppliers. And so, and you're quite right, when people shift tariff, you cannot say to any electricity company, we're going to force you to take on a customer at enormous loss because they were signed up to a company that, frankly, was not perhaps as responsible as it should have been over its pricing. That would lead to bankruptcies. In California in 2000-2001, which is maybe the most famous example of a crash of this nature, where pretty much all of their utilities went out of business because they weren't allowed to charge as much for their power as it's costing them to make it. Then you ended up with 6 whole days of power cuts, including one Sunday, just because, not because the power stations weren't available, but because the system had collapsed. Now that was a real shock. It's two decades ago now, but many people remember that and are determined not to let that happen. So government may need to look again if the responsible big companies have hit a problem. But frankly, I think for some of these smaller companies, they were always operating on something of a wing and a prayer, and I'm not sure that it would help the market if they were rescued.
Malcolm, really good to speak to you this morning. Thank you so much for coming on. That's Malcolm Grimston. He's the power market policy analyst speaking to us there. And the government, in terms of this energy bills rise, they say they have taken steps to help, including reducing the universal credit taper, providing cold weather payments and freezing alcohol and fuel duty too. So do let us know what you think and your thoughts on what Malcolm was just discussing with us there. GB Views at gbnews.uk. It's just at the bottom of your screen. We do love to hear from you.
Yeah, it is 7:16. Good to have you with us on the Great British Breakfast this morning. There can't be a few better ways to start 2022 than with a New Year honour. Many of, indeed, Team GB's Olympians and Paralympians made the cut this year. Cyclists Jason and Laura Kenny got a knighthood and damehood, while OBEs were given out to diver Tom Daly, wheelchair racer Hannah Cockcroft and gymnast Max Whitlock.
Well, the co-captain of Team GB's wheelchair rugby team, Gavin Walker, was given an MBE for his services to the sport. Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Kevin Larkin spoke to Gavin about how he was feeling about being honoured.
Gavin, first of all, congratulations on your MBE for your services to wheelchair rugby. Tell us a bit about how you found out.
A real shock. When you play sport and you want to achieve in sport, an award like this is something you're not expecting at all. And so we had a letter drop on our doormat, a bit of a strange looking letter, and then to open it and to find out that you've been put forward for an MBE is fantastic news.
And did you know anything about it in advance? Was it just literally the letter on the door?
Yeah, no sort of warning about it at all, which just makes it that extra special, I think. Obviously, athletes have got MBEs before, but it's not something you go into expecting to receive one. So.
How about your family? I'm sure they were over the moon as well, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely over the moon. I told my closest family, but it's something you've got to keep secret. So sort of holding on to that information for about a month, it's quite difficult. You just want to, spread the word.
How did getting the MBE compare to winning the gold medal in Tokyo?
It's a strange one. As soon as I won the gold medal, as soon as we won that as a team, I really felt as though that was something for everyone, something to represent our efforts as a team and something that should be shared and something that everyone should celebrate. And that's why I've gone around the schools and shown it off and been to the spinal unit to show patients that are going through a similar accident to me. But the MBE, I feel that's a little bit more personal, to represent my efforts and to really show what I've achieved personally. So I think that's the difference for me anyway.
And if I were to be cheeky and say, which one do you think would be the big one?
It's a strange question. I mean, it's a great honour to have both of them, but the gold medal is where it all started, I guess. That's something that's never been achieved by a European team, and I think that has to be the one. That's where all this fabulous things have come from. So.
And what does this do for wheelchair rugby as a sport? I know you've been campaigning very hard, and obviously the great performance in Tokyo has raised the profile. Yeah. What does this do for the recognition of the sport and the profile of the sport?
It just continues it, and it has been amazing since we've got that gold medal. The attention that we've had for the sport, people really being interested in taking up the sport as something they want to do. That's only going to increase. And then the MB and other awards that we've had since then is just going to continue that, just keep us in the limelight, and it can only be great for what we want to achieve in the future.
And obviously you've got a date at the Palace to come, which I don't believe you know as yet, but you've also got training as well. So I just want to ask how training's going, and can you spare the time? Because you athletes work so hard. Do you have that time to actually go down and collect it?
I'll definitely be making the time to go down. Don't you worry about that. But you are right. Yeah, training has started pretty much as soon as we got back. This year now is so much busier than what we would normally expect because of the restrictions we had last year. It's all been crammed into this year. So training is, we've been back for a good few months now, and Monday I'll be back in the gym again.
And how are you feeling about Paris?
Really confident. We can't be too overconfident though. The other two European teams, probably France and Denmark, are very, very competitive. They had a great Paralympics as well, particularly in the opening stages, so we can't underestimate those. But saying that, we're full of confidence, and we've got the belief now that we are able to perform in the highest level. So we just need to go out there and do it again.
Well, Gavin, we wish you all the best for the training for Paris, and congratulations once again on the MBE.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant stuff from British Paralympian Gavin Walker there, speaking to our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Kevin Larkin.
Coming up after the break, prescribed exercise. Is it a good idea? We speak to a GP to get their thoughts. First though, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking to get off to a mild but breezy and in places very showery start. The southwest of England will begin Sunday dry with some bright spells, although there will be a bit of a southwesterly breeze, which will take the edge off the mild feel. The southeast will be cloudier with quite a gusty wind blowing, and 1 or 2 showers are also on the cards here. Overnight rain will have just cleared to the east of Wales come the morning, and so it's looking mainly dry with the sun appearing in places. A different story though as we head to northwest England, as showery rain will still be clearing from these parts with drier conditions beginning to tuck in from the west. A pretty wet start is likely in Newcastle and the rest of the northeast of England. A few heavy bursts of rain are possible, although here the wind will be a little lighter than elsewhere. Whilst blustery showers are likely towards the north and west, most southern and eastern parts of Scotland should get off to a fine start, with fairly mild temperatures and some sunshine. For Northern Ireland, a mixed bag of weather is expected. There'll be some bright weather, but with a few blustery showers also sweeping in from the west. Through the remainder of the morning, most eastern areas will become dry and bright, whilst further showers feed in across the west.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farrar.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News home and security editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. Just coming up to 7:30. Really good to have you with us this Sunday morning. And we're going to talk about exercise now, because GPs are to begin prescribing judgment-free fitness classes for women seeking help with conditions including diabetes and depression. Designed by Sports England, This Girl Can classes will be launched across the country early this year, drawing on the success of its award-winning campaign of the same name.
Yeah, This Girl Can was launched in 2015 after research showed that women wanted to be more active but were held back by fear of being judged. It's helped over 500,000 women, but more recent research suggests judgmental exercise classes are still putting women off. Doctors will be encouraged to refer patients to classes as part of social prescribing, which instead of being offered medication, patients are instead going to be sent to a range of local non-clinical services to support and boost their health and well-being. Well, joining us now to discuss this is Dr. Vinir Babu. Good morning to you, Doctor. Thank you so much for your time and your company this morning. Judgment-free classes suggests, as we just heard there, that women do find these classes judgmental. What does put women off, and how will this campaign help?
Thank you for having me. Good morning to you guys too. That's a very good question. I guess there are two facets to it, right? On one side, people often feel judged even when they come to their doctor. They want to make changes, but they often think, will this person sitting in front of me think I'm either being lazy, I'm not making active changes for my own health? The second part of it is, if they go into a class, what we often find patients tell us is there might be a room full of people where everyone's looking at you a certain way if you don't, fit the exact look of what the class should be like, or if you don't come exactly how they expect you to come. So these expectations that they might find in classes that might be mixed classes sometimes, where there might be males in the same class, they may not feel as comfortable to be themselves or be active in the way that they would otherwise be if it was just an all-female class. That's what we found patients tell us. But I think what's also interesting is, although this is This Girl Can and it's a campaign all for women, we hope that in the future there would be something similar for men, because, we are in a day and time where we don't want to have a prejudice, or we don't want to leave the men out, because I know there are lots of men who want to be proactive for their health, and this is something we should also keep in mind for them as well.
So I just wanted to explore this issue of judgment and where it starts and at each stage. So you're saying, let's just go through each stage. So starting with the doctor, you're saying sometimes doctors can be judgmental when they go to get referred. Is that correct?
So I'm not saying we can be judgmental, but we can be perceived as being judgmental. If you're giving someone their results, saying, your sugar level is high and we need to make these changes, there are some proportion of patients who will take that on board and think, okay, we need to make the changes now so that we don't end up with severe diabetes, so that we don't end up with severe heart disease or complications that can be avoided. But there might be a proportion of patients who already face a lot of challenges. We've just come out of a pandemic. They may not have had access to, say, gyms or the right amount of support to make those changes, or may not have had access to the knowledge of what is nutritious food, or knowing that you have to have a nutritious diet in conjunction with exercise. Otherwise, all that exercise is absolutely pointless. So it's about supporting them in a holistic way to encourage them to make realistic and measurable changes. I think that's what's key. So not saying we are judgmental, but it can't be perceived that way unless we really support them. So prescribing something will take that responsibility off them in some way, right? Where we can say, we want you to go to these classes twice a week or once a week. And that way they can say, okay, the doctor said this to me, and this is something I need to do for my health. And I think this is a very, very positive thing if it goes forward.
And then what about the judgment when they get to the class? Where does that come? Does that come from the instructor, or at least is that the perception?
I guess it could be the setting, the environment, the instructor, their peers. But if it is a class that's directed specifically at patients who are, borderline risk or have these diagnoses, they might be in a room full of people with the same kind of background. Everyone must be there with a mindset of, we want to improve our health, we want to get healthier. So I think that would be a really empowering and encouraging thing for these women. I know I'd want to go to one of those classes. I'd love to, take a friend and go if my doctor has prescribed this, because I'd want to invest in my health, especially in the current climate after everything we've been through in the last year.
Dr. Veena, I agree with you. It's something that I would like to do as well. I think it's a great thing for the NHS as well, that, it's saving money as well, rather than prescribing medication to people, to send them along to a class. I think it's a really fantastic initiative. And I thought that This Girl Can campaign back in 2015 was really powerful as well, because I remember at the time, it does start young, doesn't it? It starts in school. This is girls who don't want to take part in PE lessons because they feel self-conscious, or they feel judged, or they feel like they're pitted against one another. This is something that starts really young for these women, isn't it?
I think, I 100% agree with you. It is. I can even relate back to myself, where I had gained weight at a certain point in life, and it took away my confidence. I didn't end up having a health condition, but it is something that does play on your mind. It is something that maybe takes away that energy you have to maybe go and do something proactive for yourself. So if you have a health professional telling you, actually, go and invest in your health, this is something we want you to do, I think it's one step closer to making that behavior change, which is what we need in all of us, so that we can go the long run, the long mile, into investing in our health overall.
And Dr. Veena, for women who are watching this at home right now and they haven't been prescribed this as their doctor, but they're watching you and they're saying they would like to get fit, but they do feel self-conscious, what would you suggest? What kind of practical tips for women that want to get fit in the new year?
Honestly, I would say just start. Start with something small and something realistic. We can't sit there and think, okay, I'm going to now do 2 hours a day for the next 7 days. Something realistic. If you have a busy life, if you have lots of kids at home, you don't have access to healthy food. Something simple as cutting out all sugary foods, cutting out fried food or crisps for even 3 days a week, and something like starting to skip while you're watching TV or watching the news, something that gets your heart rate going, gets you a little out of breath and a bit uncomfortable. Often people think, doing long shifts where you're standing for 10 or 12 hours, that's exercise. But that's actually a misconception. That just means you have an active job. You want to do something where you're getting your heart rate up, you're getting a bit out of breath and uncomfortable, and that's when you're increasing your cardiac output. And your heart predominantly is a muscle, any muscle you want to work so it gets stronger, and that would be exercise. So small steps, realistic to yourself, and that's how you should start.
Yeah, I can say from experience, having young children around can sometimes be exercise in itself. Dr. Veena Babu, thank you so much for speaking to us on the Great British Breakfast this morning. Really appreciate it.
Now, secondary school pupils will be told to wear face masks from the moment they arrive until the moment they leave when they return to classrooms this week.
Yeah, in a desperate effort to protect the education of millions of youngsters amid a sharp rise in cases of the Omicron variant, ministers have requested that pupils cover their faces all day, including while they are being taught.
The wearing of masks is not a legal requirement, but ministers expect schools to follow the guidance, which also applies to teachers and support staff. The measures will be reviewed on January the 26th, with a government source saying that they will not be in place a minute longer than they need to be, and adding it's obviously a better classroom experience without masks. Well, joining us now to discuss this and the latest COVID developments in the UK is Professor Hugh Pennington. Good morning to you, Professor, and Happy New Year to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So this is the big story in the front of all the papers today. Schools are told to go back to masks in the classroom. I mean, if anyone has children, anyone walks past a school, we know very well that children leave their classrooms, they step out the school gates, and they just whip off those masks, and they're all still together. They sit in the canteen and they take off their masks, they're all still together. I mean, how much is this actually useful to stop the spread of Omicron?
Well, it has a use. It has a use. We know wearing of masks, particularly if you've got the virus, protects the people around you to a reasonable degree. Wearing a mask in itself doesn't protect you if you haven't got the virus and you are next to somebody who has got it. It doesn't protect you anywhere near as well. But they do have a mitigating effect against transmission of the virus, even Omicron, although Omicron is better at getting through all the barriers and all the variants that we've had already before it. So, yes, it shows something is being done, and it's better in terms, at least in my opinion, it's better in terms of reducing transmission than hand sanitizing, which has really rather little effect at all. But again, if you do it, you show that you're following the rules. And I suppose you could say that if children have to wear masks, well, you know, they can demonstrate they're following the rules, and the teachers will be slightly less unhappy than they would be otherwise. But it's not going to stop transmission of the virus. It's not the silver bullet to stop the transmission of the virus. It shows that you know, something is being done, and there's going to be a relatively small but real reduction in transmission.
Right. So you're saying, I mean, big effort to get lots of school pupils across England to wear masks all day, but only a relatively small benefit, you're saying, from that?
Yes, a real benefit, but not a very big one. It's not going to stop transmission of the virus, you know, in terms of absolute prevention. But like all the things we do against COVID, all the things we do, even you know, a booster jab gives you a very good degree of protection, but it doesn't give you 100%. And it's the same with a mask, except the mask doesn't work as well as a booster.
Hugh, we know that the Omicron variant is really transmissible, and we've also seen studies in the last few days that have told us what, you know, most of us already know. This single layer cloth mask is not doing a lot to stop air particles escaping. If masks are going to be mandatory in schools, do you think it should be mandatory for children to wear the N95 masks, those ones that do work a lot better? Or do you think this should be more an investment on these air filtration units that the government are looking into implementing in schools?
I think the better the mask, the better. And that's something that could be done in terms of giving our children really, really effective masks rather than, you know, just a layer of cloth, as it were. Air ventilation is much more tricky to make sure that you have a system in every classroom and every part of a school where children are mingling. Keeping that air absolutely free of virus is really technically very difficult. Again, one might try, you know, up until a few months ago, it was opening the windows, but there's some cold weather coming, so I don't think that's really going to be something that, well, it'll be honoured in the breach, I would suspect. But air ventilation, again, it would just add to the layer of protection. It wouldn't give you absolute protection because, as I said, technically, it's really, really a very difficult thing to do throughout a school building which hasn't been designed with that in mind.
I just want to give you some figures and get your reaction to them, Hugh. This has been reported in the Telegraph, citing the Professor Oliver Johnson, the Bristol mathematician, showing that hospital admissions are rising exponentially. That's the language in the Telegraph. 2,370 admissions in England on Friday, up 69% on the week. And the surge impacting not just London and the young, but all areas of the country and all age groups. And it says there is nothing yet in the UK data to suggest that hospital stays are any shorter. What do you make of that data? Is it reliable? Are you worried?
I can't really comment on the reliability. I don't know exactly where the data came from, but I know this has been a big problem, getting hold of that data to actually assess how nasty Omicron is, because, you know, the data from South Africa and subsequent data from this country suggested that it wasn't going to be putting people in hospital as often, and if it did, they wouldn't be staying there as long as possible. But of course, each case is different, and there are people in hospital who test positive for COVID who are not there because of COVID, and you know that's an issue that's been raised quite a lot in recent days. So we really have to see really detailed data about the patients who are being admitted and the increase in number of patients who are admitted. What are they being admitted for? And my own view is that the data that really matters is the number of people going into intensive care units, because that's a real bottleneck in the sense of what hospitals can provide. It's always been a bottleneck in the sense very, very labour intensive, very complicated. Hospitals don't have an unlimited amount of capacity and all that kind of thing. And if that capacity is being really affected by people who are needing treatment because they've got the COVID pneumonia, as it were, that will be very, very, very concerning. And I'm not sure we've seen quite enough of that data yet to say, well, Omicron isn't as nasty as Delta. And also remember, there's another issue, certainly in this part of the country, in the north of Scotland, Delta is still doing quite well as Omicron. The two are running in parallel. And so, we have to see in the next few days, I think we'll see that critically important data, which then will be pushing the battle, basically, for Boris Johnson to fight his backbenchers type of issue. As to whether there really should be much more draconian measures than just getting school kids to wear masks.
Professor, just finally, with the latest data that we have, 154 coronavirus-related deaths in the latest 24-hour period. As we know, those deaths are within 28 days of a positive COVID test. And lots of people are asking the question, especially on email this morning, did those people die with or of COVID? And that is the question, isn't it? Do you think that we need to change the way that we record this data, specifically deaths, especially if this is something that we're going to have to live with forever?
Yes, that measure that you quoted, how they calculate the deaths is a very indirect one. And it doesn't actually tell you exactly what the circumstances were that led to the death of the patient. And that is really, again, quite a complicated issue technically. But there will be people who have died in hospital of something, and who've had a positive test, but haven't died from the virus at all. So in some ways, it's an overestimate. And then there will be other people, to muddy the waters even more, there'll be other people who've died of COVID who are not in the statistics at all. And we know that that's the case with many other conditions, that actually establishing a cause of death is really, really very, very difficult. And, one has to go back into history to find out exactly how that was done best. And that was done best by things like postmortems, which we do very few of these days for all sorts of obvious reasons. So those figures have to be taken with a pinch of salt. But basically, as long as we're measuring the same sort of thing over time, any change in that is obviously going to mean something. And so we still have to rely on that sort of data, and we still have to look very carefully at what the trends are, remembering that basically, if you have a COVID which kills you, it doesn't do it straight away. It's weeks, and some people are ill for really quite a long time before they're unfortunately carried off by the virus. So that's another factor that muddies the water. So I think we have to stick with the system we've got now, because it's going to be very, very difficult to get something better. But keep on, have experts sort of interrogating that data all the time, just to make sure that we're not missing something obvious. I don't think we are.
Professor, we could speak to you all morning about this. There's a lot to speak about, isn't there? Professor Hugh Pennington, thank you so much for your time.
You're watching The Great British Breakfast. 7:44 is the time. Coming up after the break, we'll be speaking to health and fitness expert Marvin Ambrosius on how we can all start 2022 in a more healthy fashion. First, though, here is the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. Good to have you with us this morning. Paul Hawkins here and Ellie Costello.
Yeah, over the course of the last 2 days, many people will be choosing their New Year's resolutions. For many people, the idea of improving fitness and health will be a key part of their New Year's plans and promises.
So how do people do this, and how can they cut out their old bad habits? For some more advice, we're joined by health and fitness expert Marvin Ambrosius. Marvin, really good to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us. I want to start by asking you, actually, we were talking to a doctor earlier about non-judgmental fitness classes for women, and she did say that really it should be expanded for women and men. I was just wondering what your thoughts were on the judgment that there can be, or at least the perceived judgment there can be for some people when they're trying to exercise, either from their doctor when they go to get referred, or even just running down the street or taking fitness classes.
First of all, happy 2022, guys, and Happy New Year. And I was listening to that, and definitely there's something that can be done in regards to that. And I think it can be a little bit, especially to a patient, a little bit intrusive and feeling a bit forced. I think one of the best things is to figure out how to support people educationally by trying to give people online coaching. Like, for instance, it's not just about prescribing somebody to go to do classes, because a lot of people do suffer from social anxiety. Some people don't go to the gyms because they basically don't want to feel in an environment where they don't feel comfortable. Taking your first steps into fitness isn't as easy as just basically going into a class environment with a bunch of people, not just being yourself. And that's where I think it needs to be more personalized and individualized to somebody so they can feel comfortable. And I think that's where we can utilize online coaching for personal trainers. And as obviously, you know, that industry was really hit quite hard. And the basis of people couldn't get to the gyms because gyms were closed. And I think it's really important that we kind of cohesively work with the NHS with personal training development so people can have a more of a one-to-one bespoke training plan, because Nobody's the same, but ultimately what we want to do is get people moving. So I did really agree with a lot of the points that Dr. Vina had on that one.
Marvin, good morning to you and a happy new year. It's a bit of a funny one, isn't it, New Year's, because you spend the time between Christmas and New Year just absolutely stuffing your face. If you're like me, you're in the cheese and the biscuits for about a week straight. And then the 1st of January hits and all of a sudden it's this get fit mentality, get back in the gym and get on a diet, it feels like. And it's quite overwhelming for a lot of people, especially if you haven't exercised before. Where is best to start and not to put too much pressure on yourself?
Well, statistics don't lie. Literally, last year, 18% of the people actually going to gyms attended the gym, and 49% of people with memberships went only around twice a week. Christmas is that time of year where we all overindulge. We drink too much, we eat too much. And what we do is set an unrealistic expectation to join a gym or decide to work out online and say we're going to work 3 times to 4 times a week or sometimes 5 times a week. And what ends up happening is between February and March, you don't actually get to your goal because you get disheartened because you're not getting there quick enough. And what we do is set a false and unrealistic expectation. So the best thing to do is kind of trick yourself to try and be consistent throughout the year, because that's one thing that we lack, especially within today's climate of what's going on and we're not looking after our health in a way where we need to. The way in which we can control our health is through our exercise and our actual nutrition and what we do ourselves. I would recommend that everybody kind of look at their current routines and find an exercise routine that they can do throughout an entire year. So if you can work out 2 to 3 times a week consistently for a year, you are going to have a significant change. But if you try and start your new year like a lot of people do, by working out excessively, way more than what they would have done throughout the whole year for that small time, they're just going to tail off, not be consistent, and eventually they're going to commit the same cycle that they've been doing throughout the year. And I think it's time to break that cycle. So whatever habits you had going forward, try and lose that and do something that's measurable and achievable to you.
Yeah, so Marvin, just very quickly, I want to finish with a quick question from one of our viewers. Archie, who says he'd be interested in getting fit, but he has arthritis in his spine. He'd like to know what he can do. He's not up for dancing. And generally speaking, you know, there are some people who can only exercise when they're sitting down. What would you suggest?
Again, this is when we need to start looking at bespoke exercises for people with conditions that need help. There is so much different exercise you can do with sitting down, using your arms, using your shoulders. But then again, there's limitations to certain movements that you can do. So that's why it's always best for where we should be working as trainers with the NHS and getting the right professionals involved so they can do exercises sitting down, working, doing bicep curls, doing breathing exercises, doing meditation, and even talking about the nutritional aspects that can help them. Because another thing, like you said, during Christmas, which is something separate, you're sitting down more, you're doing less. What we need to do is really focus on other things that can boost our immune system as well as doing exercise, focusing on the right nutrients, doing your vitamin C's, vitamin D's, vitamin E's, getting all those things in your body that can help you feel better. But most importantly, getting the right education and the people that can help the right people, like the guy that's just basically asked now. For things like that, they should have someone bespoke that they can go to that can help them find the right exercises that they can do on a daily basis.
Yeah, fitness expert Marvin Ambrosius, thank you so much for speaking to us on the Great British Breakfast this morning. It is 7:52.
OK, let's take another look at today's newspapers, and we're joined by a fantastic panel this morning to discuss today's biggest stories. Good morning to the two of you. Thank you so much. Again, you've been fantastic this morning, James Babworth and Dr. Lisa McKenzie. I wanted to ask you about this story about Scottish women being shamed for coming down to England to party on New Year's Eve. James, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I mean, there's been different restrictions brought in Scotland to England recently and in Wales. And what this has meant has been that some people over on New Year's Eve, men and women who wanted to have a night out, had to come down to England to enjoy a night out, to a city or a town in England, because the nightclubs and bars in Scotland were closed. And I mean, ever since the pandemic began in the UK in early 2020, there's kind of been this, like, busybodies feel like they've kind of hit the jackpot in that they can shame people for doing normal things, and this is still going on 2 years later. So we have these pictures of just women, working class women, enjoying a night out as you do on New Year's Eve, having a drink, having fun, And you have these people being shamed on social media as if they're doing something, terrible and this egregious thing, and they're doing something terribly wrong. 2 years into a pandemic, when 95% of people in Britain vulnerable people have been vaccinated, and it's just, it's just ridiculous. It's the same as when, over the summer you have people on the beach being shamed for not wearing masks or socially distancing on a beach outside.
Lisa, you feel strongly about this?
Yeah, I do, because as a working class woman, and my research and my studies are about working class, particularly women, and the way that working class women are constantly demeaned and devalued, particularly in the press. Usually we get these images around Aintree and when working class women go to the races, and there's lots of stories about women getting drunk and falling over. This year it's come early because it's about working class women crossing the border, wearing a glittery dress and having a good night out. And this is classist. This is misogynistic and classist. It's an old trope that the middle class and the bourgeoisie have been peddling for about 200 years, that working class women carry disease on their bodies. And I think this is what's playing out again here. It's a classist, misogynistic trope about working class women's bodies somehow being able to carry dirt and disease. These are old tropes. You go back to Dickens's work. They're in there. Women carrying disease, women, their fecund bodies, having too many children. Women's bodies are always under the spotlight. And
Lisa, I completely agree with you. I'm afraid we're coming to the top of the hour now, but I promise you we'll come back to this at the start of our next paper review, because you're definitely on something there. Plenty to discuss on the Great British Breakfast. Coming up, we're going to be talking about your reaction to the return of masks in secondary schools. That's after the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking to get off to a mild but breezy and in places very showery start. The southwest of England will begin Sunday dry with some bright spells, although there will be a bit of a southwesterly breeze, which will take the edge off the mild feel. The southeast will be cloudier with quite a gusty wind blowing, and 1 or 2 showers are also on the cards here. Overnight rain will have just cleared to the east of Wales come the morning, and so it's looking mainly dry with the sun appearing in places. A different story, though, as we head to northwest England, as showery rain will still be clearing from these parts, with drier conditions beginning to tuck in from the west. A pretty wet start is likely in Newcastle and the rest of the northeast of England. A few heavy bursts of rain are possible, although here the wind will be a little lighter than elsewhere. Whilst blustery showers are likely towards the north and west, most southern and eastern parts of Scotland should get off to a fine start, with fairly mild temperatures and some sunshine. For Northern Ireland, a mixed bag of weather is expected. There'll be some bright weather, but with a few blustery showers also sweeping in from the west. Through the remainder of the morning, most eastern areas will become dry and bright, whilst further showers feed in across the west.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
And Dan Wootton, join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning. It's just about to go 8 a.m. on Sunday, the 2nd of January. This is your Great British Breakfast with Paul Hawkins and me, Ellie Costello.
Yeah, very good morning to you. Coming up in the next hour, with all 4 nations in the UK taking different approaches to COVID restrictions, we're going to be speaking to author and commentator Kevin Marr on what consequences this could have for the State of the Union.
With bills rising, many people will be looking to cut back on expenditure in the new year. We'll be speaking to an expert on how to do this.
We'll have the latest developments from what promises to be an interesting weekend in football and darts.
And Veganuary. Is it for you? We're going to speak to someone who's backing the campaign. As always, this show is all about you. We want you to give your opinions on what are the day's big stories. Send them through to us, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Good morning to you. Happy New Year, and thanks so much for your company. Let's find out what's going on today.
Yeah, secondary school students in England are again being asked to wear masks in classrooms to help tackle the rise in Omicron. The Education Secretary, Nhs Staffing, says keeping schools open is the #1 priority as cases continue to hit record highs.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson has apparently tasked ministers with drawing up robust contingency plans as sky-high COVID cases hit the public sector and businesses. Public sector bosses have been told to prepare for a worst-case scenario of up to a quarter of staff off work. There are reports that work-from-home guidance in England could be set to roll on for most of January.
20 Tory MPs and peers have written to the Prime Minister urging him to scrap taxes on rapidly rising energy bills. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, they urged Boris Johnson and the Chancellor Rishi Sunak to help consumers facing fuel poverty as gas and electricity payments continue to rise.
Pressure continues to mount on the Prime Minister as a bombshell poll puts the Conservatives 16 points behind Labour. A Mail on Sunday poll of the 57 constituencies gained in the 2019 general election puts Labour on 49% and the Conservatives on just 33%.
And the search for survivors continues in Colorado after wildfires destroyed nearly 1,000 homes and prompted a widespread evacuation. 3 people are missing and feared dead after a wind-stoked wildfire roared through 2 towns in Boulder County. So then, with all 4 UK nations doing things differently regarding COVID restrictions, we are asking this morning, what is the state of our union?
Nicola Sturgeon's devolved Scottish Government has responded to the Omicron variant by strengthening its guidance and introducing curbs such as nightclub closures and social distancing. Similar curbs have also been introduced in Wales and Northern Ireland.
So this has put pressure on the UK government to follow with restrictions in England. The question is, why does the UK government policy differ from devolved nations, and will the differences highlighted by COVID cause a long-lasting effect on devolution and the United Kingdom? We can speak now to author and commentator on British and Irish politics, Kevin Marr. Kevin, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Are we seeing this divergence in the approach to COVID? Could this potentially lead to a breakup of the union, or are we getting a bit carried away?
I think, first of all, it's the natural implications of devolution. I mean, we've had devolution as a project really for the past 20 odd years. The creation of the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Assembly, and the devolved Assembly in Northern Ireland as well. And we've given, from the centre, we've given powers to run the local NHS, public health, lots of other powers clearly as well to the devolved executives, to devolved governments. And really, we've kind of been in lockstep on most issues all the way through. Now, Scotland, for example, with the SNP, some pretty touchstone issues where, free social care, free university tuition, they've been able to kind of afford that. But really, I think in the management of the NHS, even though it's been under local control, we've kind of been in alignment. And what COVID has brought about is actually the pattern in each of the four constituent parts of the UK is different. For example, the NHS in Northern Ireland has been badly managed and underfunded for a very long time. Scotland has got a worse public health profile than England. Wales, the tenor of the Welsh government is to be, I think, very cautious. So you can see why there's some motivations for doing things differently. And the NHS in England and the government, I think, has been loath to clamp down any harder than it absolutely needs to, whereas the three devolved governments have been quite ready to take action straight away. Now I think that reflects the advice they're getting from the medical people, but I think there's also some pretty good politics in there as well. It shows that them in charge of their locality, defining themselves a little bit against Westminster and a government that isn't desperately well represented in either Wales or Scotland. So I think they're quite happy politically how this looks. But I suspect that the primary motivation is really the public health profile and the advice that they're getting.
Kevin, that's interesting. I was just about to ask you that, actually, and I was going to ask how much of a difference these COVID rules and the devolved administrations is about public health and how much of it is about flexing political power. And even if it does make those leaders look powerful for having a different stance to England, I'm not sure how popular it makes them with the inhabitants of their countries when they're looking down south from Scotland and east from Wales and seeing that England has no restrictions whatsoever. I mean, how successful is that really in proving popular with the people that you're ruling over?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, there was all the talk, I don't know how it panned out in the end, of a mass exodus of people from Scotland and Wales over the border to English pubs for the New Year celebrations. I'm not quite sure whether that happened or not. But yes, I think it's interesting because some of the polling, for example, on Nicola Sturgeon, her personal popularity was kind of sky high during the first part of the pandemic when she was running basically a press conference every day, talking about the things that they were going to do to protect public health. And when she stopped doing that, some of her personal ratings have dropped off quite a bit. So it's quite interesting. I think that the public are prepared to go along if they think that this is the very best advice. But it's now, I think, at that point where I think we're all just a bit sick and a bit fed up, and people are perhaps a bit more reluctant and more willing to challenge the advice that comes out. But this may be the kind of the last hurrah. If touch wood, Omicron is the kind of tail end of this. Then the kinds of measures that we've seen and the kind of divergence that we've seen in the approach will probably end as well. But yeah, I think it's. I mean, to be fair to the devolved governments, their primary motivation has been protecting public health. The politics of it, which probably advantageous to them, is a secondary concern. But I think it's significant because we've not seen this before with devolution for the last 20 odd years. This is the natural, I think, evolution of where we started on that journey back in the late 1990s.
Yeah, well, does it, especially in Scotland, does it enhance the pro-independence campaign up there in a way to demonstrate, we can do things differently from the rest of the UK?
I think the optics of that, I think, are very clear. I think that's very much what the SNP government will be hoping, that actually that it puts them in the position of being able to respond in real time to a big, serious issue and govern the country. And I think if that's juxtaposed with the approach taken in England and by Boris Johnson, I think that will play very well for the SNP. Its numbers are still very good. The independents numbers, which have ebbed and flowed a little bit over the last year, seem to be starting to tilt again towards independence. So it's certainly done the SNP, Nicola Sturgeon, and the cause of independence no harm at all in that respect.
You've written a lot about Ireland and independence there. What's your feeling on independence in Scotland and when there could, if at all, be a poll?
Well, we saw back in May in the Scottish Parliament elections, a majority. The SNP failed to get an overall majority on their own, but when you add together the Scottish Green Party, which is a supporter of independence as well, there's now a majority in the Scottish Parliament for independence, and they will argue that a second tilt at independence and a referendum is justified because the first poll took place back in 2014, way ahead of Brexit, and that actually Brexit has been such a disruption that it justifies a second poll. They will also, the SNP, I think, will also use a precedent that's actually in the Good Friday Agreement. There's obviously a proviso for what's called a border poll, a referendum on Northern Ireland's constitutional future, and if that were to uphold staying in the Union, there can't be a subsequent referendum for 7 years. That's the kind of proviso in the Good Friday Agreement. Now, the SNP have seen this, I think, and said, wait a minute, 2014, that's when we had the first poll. So we are justified in pushing for a second poll because 7 years have elapsed. So it's interesting how they're using that precedent to push for a second referendum. Boris Johnson seems to be flatly saying no, but let's see how things go over the next 18 months.
Fascinating to watch. Thank you so much, Kevin. That is political commentator Kevin Marr.
Let's do some sport now, shall we? Premier League football and darts dominate today's sporting calendar. We'll also see a return of safe standing at football stadiums after almost 3 decades.
Yeah, here in the studio to talk us through it all is sports reporter Aidan McGee. Aidan, let's start with the Premier League first. And I'll be honest, I have no idea what the scores were yesterday. I don't know what happened yesterday. I am a football fan, so fill us in.
Yeah, we had an interesting game at the Emirates, first of all. That was a 12:30 kick-off against Manchester City. Real controversy, but Arsenal played so well. But it just shows how strong Manchester City are. I mean, we were discussing it earlier, haven't we, in the last week or so, just how strong City are. They click into gear at this time of year. City went 1-0 down with a goal by Bukayo Saka. But City fought back. They just know how to win games. You know, they're so strong defensively. I was talking to one of the producers out there, just talking about how they get so much credit for the way they play football and the way they spread the ball around and the number of goals they score. They don't get enough credit for how good the goalkeeper is, how good they can win games against the odds when their back's against the wall, how good they are defensively as well. There are no weaknesses in that side, and it's no surprise to me why they're 11 points ahead. And if you look at the game yesterday, they got a little bit of luck, I would say. There was a bit of controversy around the VAR decision with the penalties. Arsenal felt, certainly the goalkeeper, Aaron Ramsdale, felt that the referee should have been advised to go and look at the screen when there was a foul on an Arsenal player by a Manchester City defender, and the penalty wasn't given. But later on, when the referee was told to go and look at the screen, it resulted in an Arsenal player, Granit Xhaka, being sent off. So, bit of controversy there. Spurs won very late on, 6 minutes into injury time against Watford.
8 games in a row now without defeat?
Yeah, they put themselves right back into contention, almost without really hitting third gear, to be honest with you. So we lost one game yesterday. Norwich and Leicester was postponed because of Corona. A big day ahead today.
Right.
And tonight we've got Chelsea-Liverpool, haven't we? And they're going to try and keep up with Manchester City.
Yeah, I mean, City are now 11 points clear. Chelsea can cut the gap tonight. It's Liverpool, you'd say, in a slightly stronger position in terms of the points because they've got 2 games in hand on City. They've also got to play City later on in the season at the Etihad, so they could make a fight of it between now and the end of the season. The difficulty, of course, is that Jurgen Klopp is missing the game today with the suspected positive coronavirus test. They're missing 3 players already. They lose another 3 players to the Africa Cup of Nations this evening. Naby Keita, Mo Salah, Sadio Mane travel off this evening, I think it is, or maybe tomorrow. So they could those 3 play for, or at least 2 of them play for sides that could go deep into that tournament, and therefore it could be a month before they're seen in a Liverpool shirt again. So
and will that have an impact?
Oh, without doubt. I mean, just 2 of the front 3, the fabled front 3. I mean, last season it was suggested that they missed out on retaining their title because the centre back Virgil van Dijk wasn't around. If you take away 2 of the front 3, who are just as important to that team for a whole month. And it's going to be a busy month as well. We've got rearranged fixtures, as we said. They've got 2 games in hand. So they're going to be without those players. It's going to be a struggle, even for a side as good as Liverpool.
Yeah, and Chelsea-Liverpool, I mean, not just the actual football itself, but they're trialling this safe standing, aren't they? The return of fans standing in the stadiums.
Yeah,
this is a trial, isn't it?
It is. It's quite an emotive subject. I'm old enough to have stood on terraces every week in my early days watching football.
Yeah.
It was a brilliant experience, I have to say. I've always felt, I think people who go to football regularly, as I have, I've been to over 2,000 games. Most people from that era would say that standing was unfairly blamed for the Hillsborough disaster.
Yeah.
The fences are what caused the crushing, not the standing. There was some standing. Standing didn't actually go from English football until '94. At QPR, they finally tore down that stand in 1994. So almost coming up for 28 years ago. So it seems like a different era now. But this is much different. This is an allocated space. There's the option to sit and to stand as well in the actual place. It's not new anyway. I mean, Celtic trialled it, 2.5 years ago. We've not really seen the benefit of it because obviously most people have been locked outside the stadium. But Margaret Aspinall, who lost her son in Hillsborough in '89, and there is a documentary coming up.
There is.
Drama series
Yeah, there's a drama on Monday night.
Yeah, so it will stir old memories. I mean, I'm involved in a Facebook group about 1980s football, right? There are plenty of times when this incident could have happened at Hillsborough in other matches. There were so many flashpoints where you think, actually, that wasn't that terrace packed that day. Wasn't the stewarding a bit terrible?
So you think it was inevitable that was going to happen because of the barriers?
Without question. I mean, one thing that unites Liverpool and Arsenal and Liverpool fans is that could have happened to any clubs with that volume of support. Tottenham, Newcastle, around that era, it could have happened to them, and it nearly happened certainly in '87 at the cup tie between Tottenham and Newcastle. There's footage from that day that has been released fairly recently. How a disaster was averted that day, I'll never know.
Yeah.
It was absolutely dreadful. It really was. And so, yeah, I do think there was an air of inevitability about it.
Yeah.
Why now, Aidan? Why would you want to stand at a football match? I mean, you touched upon it there that stadiums have come a long way, but why are we looking to do this now after what we have seen happen in the past?
I think it's the passage of time. I think there's a common sense rationale now that people will look back with hindsight and think standing wasn't actually to blame. There were crush barriers there, but I mean that's that terrace at Sheffield Wednesday back then. I mean, if you looked at it, I mean, it's not that different now. I mean, they've got seats there, but you can see that the stand is disjointed.
Yeah.
What looked like a fairly modern stadium 50 years ago now looks completely out of date with everything else that's been built. We look at Tottenham that's been built in the last 3 years. Arsenal was built in 2006. It's completely different now. But I think there still is a culture within the game that there should be choice at football. The critics would say that standing did have a part to play in Hillsborough. I may disagree with that, but you have to respect that view. Some people were there on the day, so I'm not going to discredit anything they're going to say, clearly.
No, sure.
But there is an element of people needing choice. I feel there's a generation of people who've missed out on standing and the atmosphere that generates. There are people who worry that it will create a different culture in football. It will bring back the yobbish, thuggish sort of culture that we saw back in the 80s, which was undoubtedly a part. I went to QPR, didn't see much aggro back in the day, but if you ever went to Chelsea, you went to West Ham, Millwall, Cardiff, Sheffield United, all these places, you would see trouble, certainly.
And just for those who don't, just to educate those who don't go to football very often, who aren't there in the stands, I mean, are people standing anyway? Are they told to sit down?
Yeah.
And does it make a difference to the atmosphere when you are standing instead of sitting
It makes
down?
a difference to the atmosphere, certainly. I mean, there used to be two things that affected the atmosphere. It's whether you had a roof on top of the stand, because the acoustics would lend itself to an echo. And if you were standing, it was just a more jovial. It's a bit like the difference between going to sitting down at a nightclub or dancing. You know, it's which I know you two do a lot.
Yeah, always clubbing. Yeah, yeah.
So you know what I mean. It's kind of the atmosphere is slightly different. You would probably feel empowered to get up and stand up if you had a few drinks. I guess that's probably the same at football. You go to the pub beforehand, so it's different. I think not all areas of the stand. I don't think there's plans for all areas of the ground to be safe standing. But I think that it's about choice, and I think they'll try. If it doesn't work, then it's easy to take out. It's not like no one's had to build a stand. No one's had to spend £30 million building a cantilever, two-tier double-decker stand or whatever. It's just a rail of framing that allows you to stand up. But as you say, to answer your question a moment ago, it's not uncommon, particularly at away games, for people to stand up. And what that means is when you've got a row of people standing up, the row behind has to stand up to see. Stewards are outnumbered. They can have the argument if they want, but against 4,000 away fans, they're probably going to lose it.
Yeah.
So where is this trial and how long is it
It's
going
at
on for?
Chelsea. It's going to go on for a few games now. It's the first game. So it'll be the first game since 1994, I think, that's had standing in it. There might be some exceptions, because I know there were some delays back in the 90s of clubs who couldn't quite get their stadium changed. The problem was that teams were coming up from the Championship, and they were given 2 years to get their house in order, but some of them didn't last 2 years.
Yeah.
They got relegated straight away. It wasn't worth them doing it. So there will be exceptions, but yeah, Chelsea's quite a surprise place to trial it actually, because I just didn't. It's the modern era of Premier League football has just played into their hands. They're probably very happy with the status quo. There was also a feeling as well at the time that they weren't. The football authorities were never going to, and the Premier League were never going to modernise the game if they couldn't sell spaces within a stadium for 40 or 50 quid. They can never see a time when they could sell tickets for that price unless they were selling a seat. So standing got the blame.
Yeah.
We need seats. We're never going to charge.
Well, can you fit in more people if they're standing? Could you
used to be able
potentially...
to. Used to be able to. So clubs would fiddle their gates. There's no question about it. There was a cup tie at Millwall back in '89 against Liverpool.
Yeah.
Now the attendance was given as something like 17,000. I mean, anyone who was there that day. It was another day when a disaster was averted. Right. You can look on YouTube now. There's no way there's 17,000 people in there.
Yeah.
They're paying on the gate
Twice
in cash.
that, you reckon?
I wouldn't say twice. I would say, actually, no, not far off. Your arithmetic's better than mine. I'm saying 17. I reckon there's probably about 32 in there.
Wow.
So almost twice. Fans paying on the gate. Clubs would give their attendance as a certain figure. No one could really challenge it. There was no computerised mechanism for working out who'd paid what, as if no itemisation. So it was open to abuse. But I do believe also that standing did get some unfair blame for the, and it was a byproduct of the desire to move football into a different era. And Chelsea are one of the clubs who benefited most from that, which is why it will surprise some old school football fans that it's happening there.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to watch how it goes.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Aidan.
No worries,
Really
nice to see you.
And you're with us all morning, aren't you? So
Happy New Year to you as well.
Yeah,
Happy New Year.
Coming up after the break, we get the latest news from the world of sports. But first, though, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking to get off to a mild but breezy and in places very showery start. The southwest of England will begin Sunday dry with some bright spells, although there will be a bit of a southwesterly breeze, which will take the edge off the mild feel. The southeast will be cloudier with quite a gusty wind blowing, and 1 or 2 showers are also on the cards here. Overnight rain will have just cleared to the east of Wales come the morning, and so it's looking mainly dry with the sun appearing in places. A different story, though, as we head to northwest England, as showery rain will still be clearing from these parts, with drier conditions beginning to tuck in from the west. A pretty wet start is likely in Newcastle and the rest of the northeast of England. A few heavy bursts of rain are possible, although here the wind will be a little lighter than elsewhere. Whilst blustery showers are likely towards the north and west, most southern and eastern parts of Scotland should get off to a fine start, with fairly mild temperatures and some sunshine. For Northern Ireland, a mixed bag of weather is expected. There'll be some bright weather, but with a few blustery showers also sweeping in from the west. Through the remainder of the morning, most eastern areas will become dry and bright, whilst further showers feed in across the west.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
And Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. Just coming up to 8:30 on this Sunday morning. Good to have you with us. We're going to talk about the cost of living crisis, which many are talking about over the winter. Saving money, of course, arguably never been more important.
And with the new year kicking off, many people have also chosen that being more financially responsible could be their New Year's resolution. So during the age of COVID and financial uncertainty, how can people be more financially savvy? Well, luckily, to give us all some advice, we're joined now by financial expert and founder of moneymagpie.com. It's Jasmine Birtles. Jasmine, good morning to you and a happy new year. Is Jasmine there for us? Yes, she is. Hi, Jasmine.
Hello there. Hi.
Hi. Jasmine, I wanted to start first, before we get on to saving money, which is a very important topic, I wanted to talk about this rise in energy bills, which is all over the front of the newspapers this morning, and some estimates say that families will be struck by bills of £2,000. It's going to be a very difficult winter for some families, isn't it?
Yes, the news isn't great generally. I mean, one small bit of light that we've had is that insurance should be a bit of a better rate for us, as of yesterday, in fact. But otherwise, as you say, the price of energy is going up. Obviously, petrol is expensive. And we're hearing that food inflation may be with us in the next few months. So generally speaking, as you say, it's looking like a tough winter for many of us. And we're going to have to look at new ways to save money, I think.
Insurance there, just for that, I don't think this has had much publicity, but the rules on insurance have changed. So if you stick with your insurance provider instead of shopping around, it won't get more expensive. Is that correct?
Yes, that's kind of it. This is for car insurance and home insurance. Interestingly, the two insurances that have the highest amount of competition. So it has been the case that people like me every year have said to everyone, switch. Don't just stay with your current provider. And now the insurance companies have been told that they may not offer better deals to new people than to the ones that they have at the moment. So in other words, they need to not penalise loyalty, which is what they have been doing for the past few years. So I think this is a good thing. It means that we have fairer dealings with people who have insurance. But the issue there possibly is that there won't be such amazing deals to switch to now, because, as I say, people like me were saying, go on, switch. You still can switch, and it's there is still competition out there, so you could potentially still get a better deal with another company, but they won't be such fantastic deals as they were before.
Jasmine, if we go back to energy bills, 20 energy suppliers have gone out of business since September of last year in the last 3 months of the year, and those customers have had to be shifted to new providers, potentially more expensive tariffs than they were on previously. And as we're talking about the cost of living continuing to rise, there will be fears that more companies will go out of business. Is there anything that people can do that perhaps with smaller suppliers, they might be a bit worried about that? Is there anything they can do to protect themselves?
Well, there's nothing to stop you switching now. If you think that there's a possibility of your smaller supplier going bust, then you could potentially switch now to one of the big six. I'm not sure if it's worth it, because I think, now I could be wrong here, but I think that by now the smaller suppliers are probably the ones that will survive. Don't take my word for it, but if you switch now, it's quite possible that you will be switching to quite a high rate, another high rate. So you're probably better off just sticking where you are for the moment, see how it goes. If yours does tank, then you will be anyway moved on to one of the bigger companies. And once you've moved, once things have settled down, then it's probably worth having a look around and seeing if there is anything better than you've got at the moment. But with energy prices go up and down. We are very much in an up at the moment. Although back in 2020, well, right at the early 2021, they couldn't give gas away. So it's quite possible that we will come at some point, and I don't know when, maybe this year, maybe next year, maybe the year after, to really cheap prices again, where gas again is cheap. So it's not necessarily going to be for a long time. So it is going to be difficult for a lot of families, I think. For some families, particularly those who were struggling already, they may be asking themselves, do we heat or do we eat? But the long term, I think, means that we won't necessarily have such high prices going forward later on, once we're over this hump.
But in the short term, within this hump, where can you save money? Because shopping around for insurance providers may not necessarily get you a better deal. Shopping around for shopping around for energy providers may not get you a better deal. Where can you save money in other parts of the household finances?
Yes, happily, there are lots of ways to do it. And now is a brilliant time to get your bills out, to get your statements out, and really think to yourself, okay, how can I save money over time, over the next year? And there are lots of ways. Firstly, there are lots of utilities that we can switch. We've got other types of insurance. In fact, your car and your household insurance now is a good idea to have a look around and see what else there is. All types of insurance, travel insurance if you're going away, your mobile phone, your TV package. Have a think about if you're using your TV package. It may be that you could get rid of that one, go to Freeview. So it's worth having a real audit of your whole life and saying, do I use that gym membership? Now is the time that people join gyms, but you might already have one and you might not be using it. Maybe it's time to think about something else. It's a time to really have a look at where you're spending. And even when it comes to energy bills, actually very small changes that you can make in the house can make a difference to your bills.
Actually, on that, Jasmine, Paul's emailed us, a good morning to you, Paul, saying, tell people to have few less expensive coffees and take a flask of coffee to work and drink tap water. They would save pounds. I mean, it sounds a little bit trite, but he's got a point.
He does, yeah. It is really these small changes, small daily changes that actually add up. And it's a question of thinking, what do I love? What makes my life better? Now, for some people, buying a coffee on the way to work means that they can get through their day. And having lunch made for you means that you can cope with the rest of the afternoon. For some people, it genuinely does make a difference to their lives. So I say, fine, keep that. keep that coffee, but cut something else, something that doesn't matter so much. Maybe you're taking the bus to work when honestly you'd be better off walking. If you really think everybody's different, so really think what makes my life better. Okay, I will spend on that. If I can get it cheaper, I'll do that as well. What do I basically not really care about? So those things you can cut down, you can cut right out potentially. And at the same time, think about what you can save to put into savings for later, because this is the other important thing. We need to be putting money away into pensions, into stocks and shares, ISAs, into long-term investments. And what I say to people is pay yourself first. So set up a standing order at the beginning of the month, even if that's a tenner. If you can afford a tenner, if that's all it is, fine. Put that aside. Set up a standing order to put a tenner a month at the beginning of the month before you pay anybody else into your own investments so that you can look after your future self.
Jasmine, as always, fantastic practical advice. Really good to have you on the programme, and a happy new year to you as well. That's Jasmine Bertels. She's a money-saving expert and founder of moneymagpie.com.
Lots of you getting in touch with us this morning on a range of issues. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We were talking about the trial on standing in football stadiums, which starts tonight at Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, who are taking on Liverpool in the Premier League. Michael's been in touch with us, who says he says standing may have played a small part in the Hillsborough disaster, but only because many other factors played their part in the tragedy. Communication, policing, fans without tickets, drinking. Even though at the inquest no one was allowed to suggest anyone had been drinking alcohol, which Michael says is totally unbelievable. It's going to be very emotive to see fans standing in the terraces tonight, even though it is only a trial taking place at a few Premier League games over the coming weeks, and interesting to see whether it's actually implemented permanently. So do drop us a line on what you think about standing in football stadiums. Yeah, we will be speaking to Aidan McGee as well, who's a football journalist, and he's with us just after 9 a.m. We're going to be having a longer discussion about it then. We've also been discussing COVID testing and a shortage of lateral flow tests. Sajid Javid has said that's going to continue for the next 2 weeks at least. Noel has been in contact with us on email. He says, I believe that we should stop testing people completely. It is the testing of asymptomatic healthy people that is causing the issue of further restrictions. He said before COVID, if you were unwell, you just stay off work and not visit people who are vulnerable. And he says that we should have this same common sense now. Well, thank you very much, Noel, for getting in touch. And if you do want to get in touch with any thoughts that you have on the stories that we're covering today, do so on the email that's just on your screens now, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And also just a very quick shout out to Marvin, who says, hi, does nobody live in North Wales? When you give the weather reports, you never mention our area. You always talk about Cardiff, which is a 4-hour drive away. So just for you, Marvin, in North Wales, it is 11 degrees today and it's going to be rainy. So that's just for Marvin, just because he emailed us. Don't start sending us postcode requests or anything like that. But yeah, that is what the weather is looking like in North Wales. I hope that pleases you, Marvin. Thank you.
Now, there can be few better ways to start 2022 than with a New Year honour. It would be nice, wouldn't it? And many of Team GB's Olympians and Paralympians have made the cut this year. Cyclist Jason and Laura Kenny got a knighthood and damehood, while OBEs were given out to diver Tom Daly, wheelchair racer Hannah Cockcroft and gymnast Max Whitlock. The co-captain of Team GB's wheelchair rugby team, Gavin Walker, was given an MBE for his services to the sport. Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Kevin Larkin spoke to Gavin about how he was feeling after being honoured.
Gavin, first of all, congratulations on your MBE for your services to wheelchair rugby. Tell us a bit about how you found out.
A real shock. When you play sport and you want to achieve in sport, an award like this is something you're not expecting at all. And so we had a letter drop on our doormat, a bit of a strange looking letter, and then to open it and to find out that you've been put forward for an MBE is fantastic news.
And did you know anything about it in advance? Was it just literally the letter on the door?
Yeah, no sort of warning about it at all, which just makes it that extra special, I think. Obviously, athletes have got MBEs before, but it's not something you go into expecting to receive one. So. How
about your family? I'm sure they were over the moon as well, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely over the moon. I told my closest family, but it's something you've got to keep secret. So sort of holding on to that information for about a month, it's quite difficult. You just want to, spread the word.
How did getting the MBE compare to winning the gold medal in Tokyo?
It's a strange one. As soon as I won the gold medal, as soon as we won that as a team, I really felt as though that was something for everyone, something to represent our efforts as a team and something that should be shared and something that everyone should celebrate. And that's why I've gone around the schools and shown it off and been to the spinal unit to show patients that are going through a similar accident to me. But the MBE, I feel that's a little bit more personal, to represent my efforts and to really show what I've achieved personally. So I think that's the difference for me anyway.
And if I were to be cheeky and say, which one do you think would be the big one?
It's a strange question. I mean, it's a great honour to have both of them, but the gold medal is where it all started, I guess. That's something that's never been achieved by a European team. I think that has to be the one. That's where all this fabulous things have come from. So.
And what does this do for wheelchair rugby as a sport? I know you've been campaigning very hard, and obviously the great performance in Tokyo has raised the profile. Yeah. What does this do for the recognition of the sport and the profile of the sport?
It just continues it, and it has been amazing since we've got that gold medal. The attention that we've had for the sport, people really being interested in taking up the sport as something they want to do. That's only going to increase. And then the MB and other awards that we've had since then is just going to continue that, just keep us in the limelight, and it can only be great for what we want to achieve in the future.
And obviously you've got a date at the Palace to come, which I don't believe you know as yet, but you've also got training as well. So I just want to ask how training's going, and can you spare the time? Because you athletes work so hard. Do you have that time to actually go down and collect it?
I'll definitely be making the time to go down. Don't you worry about that. But you are right. Yeah, training has started pretty much as soon as we got back. This year now, it's so much busier than what we would normally expect because of the restrictions we had last year. It's all been crammed into this year. So training is, we've been back for a good few months now, and Monday I'll be back in the gym again.
And how are you feeling about Paris?
Really confident. We can't be too overconfident though. The other two European teams, probably France and Denmark, are very, very competitive. They had a great Paralympics as well, particularly in the opening stages, so we can't underestimate those. But saying that, we're full of confidence, and we've got the belief now that we are able to perform in the highest level. So we just need to go out there and do it again.
Well, Gavin, we wish you all the best for the training for Paris, and congratulations once again on the MBE.
Thank you so much.
Great stuff, and congratulations to Gavin from everyone at GB News. Coming up after the break, our brilliant panel will review more of today's top stories after this short break.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. Time has just gone 8:43 with Paul Hawkins and me, Ellie Costello. Here's this morning's headlines.
Yep, secondary school students in England are again being asked to wear masks in classrooms to help tackle the rise in Omicron. The Education Secretary, Nhs Staffing, says keeping schools open is the #1 priority as cases continue to rise.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson has apparently tasked ministers with drawing up robust contingency plans as sky-high COVID cases hit the public sector and businesses. Public sector bosses have been told to prepare for a worst-case scenario of up to a quarter of staff off work. There are reports that work-from-home guidance in England could be set to roll on for most of January.
20 Tory MPs and peers have written to the Prime Minister urging him to scrap taxes on rapidly rising energy bills. This is in the Sunday Telegraph. They've urged Boris Johnson and the Chancellor Rishi Sunak to help consumers facing fuel poverty as gas and electricity payments continue to rise.
Pressure continues to mount on the Prime Minister as a poll puts the Conservatives 16 points behind Labour. Mail on Sunday survey of the 57 constituencies gained in the 2019 general election puts Labour on 49%, the Conservatives on just 33%.
And the search for survivors continues in Colorado after wildfires destroyed nearly 1,000 homes and prompted a widespread evacuation. 3 people are missing and feared dead after a wind-stoked blaze roared through 2 towns in Boulder County.
Well, let's go back to our fantastic morning panel. They've been with us all morning and they've been brilliant. They're going to be discussing today's biggest stories. It's James Budworth and Dr. Lisa McKenzie. Lisa, I did cut you off in our last paper review. We were talking about those Scottish women that were shamed for coming down to party in Newcastle on New Year's Eve. How did you take that story?
Well, it first kind of broke on Twitter, I think, when I first saw it. And there was lots of comments about, oh, look at the state of them, you know, they haven't got any clothes on again and their accents. And it was all the same stuff that comes out all the time. So it seems to me that whenever there is a chance to have a good bashing of working class women, you know, it happens. So for these women, you know, they decided to travel perhaps 5 miles in a taxi from on the border town and go out in Carlisle. They were interviewed by the BBC and obviously the Twitter outrage out there. You know, it's time these sort of outraged people had a day off actually and thought about something more serious. But you know, they were wearing short skirts and you know they were bringing disease over and you know, and this narrative about diseased and dirty working class women has been with us for a long, long time. You know, working class women carry disease on their bodies. It's an old historical trope and it still seems to be alive and well, but it just keeps manifesting itself in whatever new story comes along. So I'm not surprised at all that working class women from Wales and from Scotland, who, by the way, looks fantastic, had done a brilliant job of getting dressed up that night, came and had a party, and obviously, the curtain twitchers of Britain couldn't have a day off and let them enjoy themselves.
Lisa, Gary's been in touch on email. He says he's totally agreeing with the condemnation of this story about ladies coming across the border. He says it's so mainstream media, which, of course, what you're touching upon there, the treatment of those women. Thank you, Gary, for getting in touch there, and do get in touch if we're talking about any stories that you have an opinion on. GBViews at gbnews.uk. James, what did you make of the treatment of the women coming over for New Year's Eve?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been this, ever since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020 in the UK, there's been this kind of culture that's grown up on social media of shaming people for doing normal things. And to some extent, at the beginning of the pandemic, when the hospitals were full of COVID patients and people were dying in quite large numbers and we were under lockdown, I mean, yeah, there's some kind of logic to that, but then it's just kind of spiraled. So now, 2 years into the pandemic, when most people are vaccinated, when almost all vulnerable people are vaccinated, you still have this culture of like this busybody kind of curtain twitching culture of shaming people just for going out and having fun. I think it's these people need to get a life.
Would it be the same, James, if they were men?
I think to some extent. I agree that I think women. There's kind of more lines of attack that people use because it tends to be focused on what the women are wearing, the short skirts and etc. But I also think it's and working class people. But I also think there's just this culture of shaming people, for younger people, to going out to clubs and to bars and stuff. You hear people on social media saying, "Oh, this isn't important. It should be closed down." It's just kind of this kind of resentful, like busybody attitude, just that opposes people just having fun.
Cheese and wine's all right. Cheese and wine's all right, and polite conversation, but, vodka and orange and a dance isn't.
Yeah, cheese and wine, fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Vodka, orange and a dance,
yeah,
something that rhymes with dance.
Not okay.
Right.
I wonder why that is.
Yeah, actually, in fact, Simon says, good on the women that travel to England for a night out. Shame on Wales and Scotland for locking down pubs. Listen, let's talk about levelling up. There's a white paper, I think, due to be published this week on the government's levelling up agenda and exactly what that means and how they're going to level things up. And at the same time, we're hearing that Boris Johnson, according to a poll today, is losing support in red wall seats. What proportion of that loss in support do you think is about levelling up, and what support is about trust in the government and COVID measures?
I think that we haven't really heard what levelling up really means yet. I mean, it's something that I understand why the levelling up agenda is attractive to so-called red wall seats, because these are areas that have been, as is frequently said, left behind by some of the cities since industry went from those places. So I mean, I can see the appeal of levelling up in those places, but what does it actually mean? We need to know that. And I think the fact that Boris Johnson, it does appear to be losing support in the red wall seats, I think there's several things behind that. I think one is the hypocrisy about the fact that Downing Street, they were having cheese and wine parties while everyone else was making these huge sacrifices during lockdown. And I also think the Labour Party has kind of improved has upped its game since the Corbyn era. I think the Labour front bench is much more impressive now than it was under Jeremy Corbyn, and Keir Starmer's a much better performer, a much more kind of respectable kind of candidate than for potential Prime Minister than Jeremy Corbyn was. I think that's a big factor as well.
I mean, I'm from one of those red wall seats. I'm from Ashfield. I'm from Sutton-in-Ashfield. So what does levelling up mean? It's one of those terms that we're not sure what's going to happen. I read in the local newspaper last week that Mansfield is going to have some student flats because that's going to help. The fact that we've got that the manufacturing industry, was decimated 20 years ago and nothing has replaced it. The colleges there, they focus on nails, beauticians, that sort of thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But remember, these communities used to have highly skilled workers in engineering and sewing and tailoring and brewing. We had highly skilled people that, the Tory government at the time had no value in. So And then you've got this term left behind. I reject that term so much because left behind, it always says that, you know, those people didn't keep up. It's something about those people not catching up. They weren't left behind. They were purposefully left out by Tony Blair and his government. So you had a Conservative government that smashed them, and then you had a Labour government that dismissed them and pushed them to the margins. And there they are, you know, they've been sort of struggling on ever since, and now you've got a Conservative government saying that they're going to level them up. No one knows what that means. Do I think that Labour is going to make gains in those areas? No, I don't. I think what's happening now is almost like an anti-politics happening, that people don't trust anybody in the political system.
So voter turnout falls. That's what you're forecasting.
Yes, voter turnout will fall. The people that will vote Tory will always vote Tory. The people who vote Labour will always vote Labour. But it will. I mean, I think in Nottingham, where I'm from, one of my constituencies, the Labour MP got in with something like 13% of the vote. I mean, that's not really democracy, is it? It's not very democratic.
Or the other option is, Lisa, we see what we've seen in the past two by-elections, and there's swings to Lib Dems.
Yeah, it could be swings to Lib Dems. I'm seeing a rise throughout the country in independents, actually. Local people independently going, I've had enough of this. We care about the local school closing. We're going to campaign around the local school. I think that's a better alternative, personally.
James, you've seen a story in the Times about catfishing. That's caught your eye this morning, hasn't it?
Yeah, so there was a lady was a victim of catfishing for 10 years. She believed she was in a relationship. So catfishing is someone essentially pretending to be someone who they're not online. The word is quite common in like dating apps where it's very easy to set up a fake profile. But this woman was strung along by someone she believed was a doctor and had an online relationship with, a romantic relationship for 10 years. I mean, and she's calling for a change in the law to make this a specific criminal offence. I mean, I feel very sorry for the woman who's experienced this, but I think I think this is an issue where people's kind of education about the online world being different from the real world, I think that's where the focus really needs to be here, that how people present themselves online, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on a dating app, whether it's on any social media forum, is not necessarily who they are in real life. And I think people need to... I mean, I feel sorry for her, but to have a 10-year relationship with someone and not meet them in real life seems slightly bizarre and quite naive, I would say.
Lisa, what do you make of that story?
I think, you know, I'm obviously more interested in the politics of this and the politics of the online. And I think one of the things that we have got to start to be aware of, politicians need to realise this as well, is Twitter is not real life. What people say on Twitter is not real life. And I think, I don't know, you know, the internet sort of came upon us and now we can't live without it. So, you know, I think we need to start thinking a bit more about this separation between online and real life.
Yeah, it's becoming blurred, especially with the so-called metaverse on the way, apparently, where we all become avatars in some weird world. Listen, guys, really good to have your thoughts this morning. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. That is James Bloodworth and Dr. Lisa Mackenzie joining us on the Great British Breakfast.
And if any of those stories have caught your eye, please do get in touch with us, gbnews@gbnews.uk. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to have Aidan McGee here with the sport. But first, we're going to have the weather and the news with Ray Addison.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking to get off to a mild but breezy and in places very showery start. The southwest of England will begin Sunday dry with some bright spells, although there will be a bit of a southwesterly breeze, which will take the edge off the mild feel. The southeast will be cloudier with quite a gusty wind blowing, and 1 or 2 showers are also on the cards here. Overnight rain will have just cleared to the east of Wales come the morning, and so it's looking mainly dry with the sun appearing in places. A different story, though, as we head to northwest England, as showery rain will still be clearing from these parts, with drier conditions beginning to tuck in from the west. A pretty wet start is likely in Newcastle and the rest of the northeast of England. A few heavy bursts of rain are possible, although here the wind will be a little lighter than elsewhere. Whilst blustery showers are likely towards the north and west, most southern and eastern parts of Scotland should get off to a fine start, with fairly mild temperatures and some sunshine. For Northern Ireland, a mixed bag of weather is expected. There'll be some bright weather, but with a few blustery showers also sweeping in from the west. Through the remainder of the morning, most eastern areas will become dry and bright, whilst further showers feed in across the west.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.